Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. Extracting the immortality of cancer cells at the beginning. Chapter 61. In the evening, Newman stood in front of the window with a sad face, looking at the darkening sky outside the window. Her heart was full of anxiety and uneasiness. Just now, she hurriedly packed her luggage and waited until tomorrow morning to prepare to quietly leave the city with her daughter Zoe. Not only is Newman Edgar's adopted daughter, she has witnessed dirty politics and super-British transactions since she was a child. She has cooperated with the arrogant fool Homelander, and she knows how dangerous her current situation is. She has great ambitions, but ambitions must always be matched with intact lives. She didn't know the character of Jonathan, the captain of the 7 team. Homelander alone is like this, and she doesn't dare to bet on others. Especially after Homelander was defeated and the soldier boy was captured. With her keen perception of crisis, she dared to guarantee that things were definitely not as simple as the outside world spread. Jonathan was able to monopolize the government, which means that he must have used some means. Otherwise, with Homelander's character, such a thing would never happen. So these days, she and her daughter Zoe stayed at home, treading on thin ice, fearing that someone would find them. Half a month passed like this, and she no longer wanted to endure this kind of life, so she decided to move with her daughter. Just then, a sudden doorbell broke the silence in the house. Half a month. No one except the messenger had come to ring the doorbell. Who was it? Newman suddenly shuddered, looked at the door vigilantly, stepped back, and asked her daughter Zoe, who was still watching TV outside, to go back to her room and lock the door. After doing this, she walked to the door carefully and looked out through the peephole. When she saw who was coming, her heartbeat almost stopped for half a beat. It was Jonathan. Is this finally coming? Newman took a deep breath and tried to calm her intense heartbeat. At this time, she was still wearing pajamas, and the beautiful scenery was leaking out, making her feel extremely uneasy both physically and mentally. Despite this, she still opened the door. Good evening, Newman, Jonathan said with a smile on his face. He was not wearing a uniform, but just a casual sportswear. Woo Jin, it's so late. Is there something wrong? Newman asked coldly, trying to hide his nervousness. Jonathan first glanced at the room, and then his eyes fell on the suitcase behind Newman. It seems I came at the right time. Do you want to move? Newman's heart sank. She didn't know if her plan had been exposed, so she could only bite the bullet and respond. I do want to take my daughter to the countryside for a walk, but it doesn't seem to have anything to do with you, right? If it's nothing, I'll see you off. Jonathan chuckled and walked into the house without caring. Newman's pupils shrank, and she subconsciously took a step back, but she still remained vigilant at all times. She knew that her ability might be useless in front of Jonathan, but she was still ready to take action at any time. Then his pupils turned slightly white, and his whole spirit was focused on the blood in Jonathan's brain, trying to manipulate them to detonate. Jonathan looked at Newman, who was performing hard in front of him, and he did feel the blood in his mind that was ready to move, but he was suppressed by him and dared not move the blood at all, so he looked at Newman with a smile. Newman was also a smart person. When she saw Jonathan's meaningful smile, she knew that all her cards were useless at this time. Despair, doubt. Newman stopped his ability and slumped on the sofa, with a look of powerlessness and unwillingness in his eyes. It seems that you know all my secrets. Don't be nervous, Newman. Jonathan sat down on the sofa, calm and composed. In fact, I came here to talk to you. Hearing these words, which were almost exactly the same as what Homelander had said when he first came to him, Newman subconsciously frowned and said, "We have nothing to talk about. On the contrary, Newman, I'm not like Homelander, that giant baby, who plays a good card badly," Jonathan said, and his eyes met Newman's. "We have a lot to talk about, such as your continued campaign for vice president." Hearing this, Newman was suddenly stunned. She didn't expect Jonathan to say such a thing. She had previously hired someone to assassinate Jonathan and instigated public opinion to spread rumors about him. This? Are you kidding? Jonathan shook his head, and the playful expression on his face became serious. Seriously. In fact, not only do I hope you continue to run, I also plan to push you to the position of vice president and fulfill your dream. Newman looked at Jonathan in disbelief, trying to get his look for any trace of joke or deception in his expression. But she found that Jonathan's eyes were very clear, and he really looked like he was thinking seriously. "Why?" Newman asked, his voice full of doubt. Jonathan leaned lazily on the sofa. "The situation is more complicated than you think, Newman. Although the Homelander is in trouble, it does not mean that I can continue to be in power. Some congressmen and some shareholders are afraid of influence and afraid that I will dominate the market. Coincidentally, I am a very lazy person. These power struggles are not as refreshing as my honeymoon with my girlfriend." Newman slowly understood Jonathan's intentions. "So, you need me to balance the situation." Jonathan nodded. "Yes, your image in the public has always been good, and you have enough strength and experience in elections. In addition, you have been Edgar's black glove for many years, so you must be familiar with the operation." Newman fell into deep thought after hearing this. To be honest, this proposal is indeed tempting, but she is not sure whether Jonathan can be trusted, especially since the two were enemies before. She doesn't believe that Jonathan is so kind that he would let her sit and take advantage of everything. Could it be that he is greedy for her body? Or, in a threesome? I must be wet, so, why do you think I will agree? Thinking of this, Newman turned his head and asked, with a hint of questioning in his voice. Jonathan continued to smile and said, "Because this is beneficial to both of us. You get power and security, and I get support and stability. And," he paused, "don't think too much, I'm not interested in you. I can arrange for your daughter to study at Godolphin University, with free tuition, free choice of college, and live in the best dormitory. Or let her find a reliable boyfriend." Quote, hearing this, Newman was indeed moved. As the top university for superhumans, she knew how difficult it was to get into Godolphin University. When she was in the Red River Orphanage, she had hoped to get into this university. But if you want a place, money alone is far from enough. The key is to rely on connections. If that's the case, then it's indeed possible. Jonathan looked at the changes in Newman's eyes and face and knew that she had already made up her mind. A wise choice, Newman. Happy cooperation. Jonathan stretched out his hand and shook hands with Newman. "Don't worry, I'm different from my countrymen. Fighting and killing is meaningless, and win-win cooperation is the main theme after all. When you actually take the position of vice president, I will not restrict your freedom. I only need you to have the official certification of the Congress. As for the selection of the national defense, you can take your time. There is still plenty of time." After the meeting between Jonathan and Newman, Newman took the team he had formed before and returned to the congressional election stage, competing fiercely with the candidates. With Jonathan's special consent, Huey led the Hydra department to enter the public opinion war to promote Newman's campaign. In a very short period of time, Newman's poll rating was raised to an unprecedented high, and finally Newman became vice president with a 200-vote advantage over his competitors. After Newman took office, the first thing he did was to establish Jonathan's leading position in the Vought group, and at the same time asked his subordinates to submit a number of proposals on the entry of superhumans into national defense. In addition, she also legalized the sale of Compound Number 5, but buyers must be registered before they can buy it, so as not to give terrorists an opportunity. For a time, the popularity of the Vought group reached its peak again, and countless shareholders stared at Vought stocks in the middle of the night with shining eyes. The supply of Compound Number 5 gave birth to more superhumans, and the whole society entered the superhuman trend, and the disputes between other races were constantly reduced. In addition, because Butcher had a brain tumor after injecting an overdose of temporary Compound Number 5, he no longer had a revenge target, and he did not evolve a tumor man because of his obsession. He took Ryan back to seclusion with all his heart, wanting to fulfill his father's duties before he died and make up for his regrets. The Black Robe picket team was therefore led by him, and cooperated with the newly established Supervision Department of Water to become a professional paid inspector. Wherever there was a superhuman crime, they would appear. Since then, the Black Robe world has entered a period of prosperity, and the image of Water Company has become better and better in the hearts of the people. In the center of New York, there is also a gate of Godolphin University, and a rich man specially built a statue of Jonathan with pure gold, and called him the real savior. After Deep Sea was recalled to the Seven, he temporarily gave up mollusks and focused on his career with his wife Cassandra. By the way, he also unified the leaderless Jijong Church, worked hard to promote marine environmental protection, and occasionally searched for treasures at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean to add assets to the group. Xingguang and Huey held a grand engagement party in Washington, and planned to get married after their honeymoon. Let's talk about our protagonist Jonathan. He has been in the Black Robe world for more than half a year, and now it's time for him to return. Now the Black Robe world has been included in his pocket. As long as he wants, all the resources of the Black Robe world can basically be mobilized by his order. It is qualified as a backup world. Next, it's back to Marvel. But Jonathan didn't tell anyone about his return, including his girlfriend Kate. The crossing itself is Jonathan's biggest secret. If he tells it out, there is a risk of leaking the news, not to mention, when he crossed over, the flow rate of the two worlds was suspended while flowing. That is to say, when Jonathan returns to the Marvel world, he will only return to the moment when he crossed over, and the Black Robe world will stop flowing at the same time. According to the information given by the system, after completing the back and forth crossing, the double doors on both sides will be officially activated, and Jonathan can cross at any time, and at the same time he can control the flow rate of the Black Robe world at will. In this way, there is no need to tell Kate his secret for the time being, and it will not be too late to tell it after it stabilizes in the future. Thinking of this, Jonathan locked the door of his office tightly to prevent any possibility of being seen, and then his mind sank, and he looked at the virtual holographic screen suspended in the air. On the screen, a big "Return" was printed on the status bar. Jonathan did not hesitate, and his mind moved, and the word "Return" instantly dissipated like smoke and dust. Then, a dark green and dark blue light spot appeared in front of Jonathan, and then the light spot turned into a cross and spread, gradually spreading to the entire space. All the surrounding matter, including Jonathan's body itself, seemed to be compressed sharply under a mysterious force, and finally flashed and turned into a singularity again, dissipating in the Black Robe world. The dust didn't move at all, as if Jonathan was deleted by the program without any trace. With Jonathan's disappearance, the whole world stopped and time froze. On the other side, Jonathan's body turned into a tributary, flashing at a speed invisible to the naked eye in a dark green space, crossing layers of virtual barriers, and finally came to a sleeping, huge body. This sleeping huge body looks exactly like Jonathan. But in comparison, this Jonathan stands upright, with countless star clusters above his head, indescribable ripples under his feet, and his body spans thousands of miles. Just close your eyes and maintain a fixed supporting posture, suspended in the black deep space. The tributary that passed through turned into a spiritual light, gradually flew to the top of the giant, Jonathan, and finally merged into the skin. After the fusion, the giant, Jonathan's eyes suddenly showed a burst of peerless light. The light illuminated the entire space, and also awakened the true body that had returned to the god. In the Marvel world, on a special bed. Ding ding ding. Jonathan's rolling eyeballs stopped turning, and the blue light under his eyelids flashed again. Return to the anchoring world successfully. Data is being imported. Imported successfully, the same branch has merged with the main body. The familiar voice in his mind sounded again. When Jonathan slowly opened his eyes, he was surprised to find that Rumlow, Sitwell and his chief father Pierce were already sitting next to his bed. "Jonathan, are you awake? How do you feel?" Pierce adjusted his glasses, and a trace of concern and imperceptible excitement flashed in his eyes. Make way, make way. Family members, please cooperate with our medical staff. The patient has just woken up and needs to be examined." Strange wore a sterile cap on his head and put on sterile rubber gloves. He hurried to Jonathan's side for examination, but was stopped by Rumlow, who was watching. "What do you mean, family members? You will affect the patient's examination. If something goes wrong, you can't bear it. Don't stop me." "I'm sorry, Dr. Strange. This is our important treatment object. It involves our internal secrets. If there is any offense, please forgive me." Sitwell was not as rigid and unkind as Rumlow. He explained to Strange with a smile on his face, which gradually calmed Strange. "You are really sending the patient in but not letting the medical staff approach. You only did some simple basic brain examinations and tests. Really, it delayed my time for surgery." After saying that, Strange packed up his own things and rushed to the next department, leaving the three people to look after Jonathan. Since the patient is awake and the basic data is normal, he will not waste time to rule out specificity and leave the other work to the nurse. Here, Pierce slowly helped Jonathan up from the bed and said, "Do you feel any discomfort?" "Well, no, I feel good now and should be able to walk." "Really?" Hearing this, Pierce quickly looked at Sitwell and Rumlow, and they all showed an expression of, as expected. "Ahem, nephew. Uncle may tell you something strange, don't be nervous. We seem to have detected some abnormal data in you, which is very special compared to ordinary people." Seeing that Sitwell's explanation was not clear, Pierce took a deep breath and said slowly, "Jonathan, we conducted a series of tests on you while you were in a coma. But the results show that your body seems to have undergone some kind of mutation. Your cell structure is different from that of ordinary people, and it shows some extraordinary characteristics." Hearing this, Jonathan pretended to be surprised in order not to reveal his flaws. "Really? What kind of changes are there?" Sitwell took over the conversation. "According to our preliminary observations, your cell regeneration ability has been greatly enhanced, and your metabolic rate is far higher than that of ordinary people. Moreover, your muscle density and bone strength have been significantly improved." Rumlow on the side continued to add with a paper report. "Not only that, we also found some in your blood unknown substances. These substances seem to be the key to your body mutation." Quote. Pierce looked at his youngest son's eyes seriously, with a complicated expression. "Jonathan, can you feel your changes? Do you have any special feelings?" Jonathan paused, pretended to think for a while and then answered. "To be honest, I do feel that my body is lighter and stronger than before. But I don't know what special changes there are." Quote. Seeing this, Pierce nodded thoughtfully. "Don't worry, we will continue to observe and study. The most important thing now is that you should stay calm and don't easily reveal this to outsiders." Quote. "I understand, Father." Jonathan performed seriously, with a serious look in his eyes and a confused expression. Even Nick Fury couldn't tell whether it was false or true. It didn't look like acting. Pierce patted his son's shoulder, and a subtle expectation flashed in his eyes. As a high-ranking member of Hydra, he has been planning for the future of the organization. Now, his son's body is suspected to have special changes, which is undoubtedly a great opportunity to lead Hydra to rise. Most of the Orthodox members of Hydra are too old or lying in the hospital with breathing tubes inserted at this time. Now that Jonathan has such a special ability, can he extract some cells or tissues for research to develop a drug that can delay aging? But at the same time, he doesn't want Jonathan to be involved in too many dangerous affairs. He already has 2 older brothers who have inherited the affairs. At the beginning, he just wants his youngest son to live a good life and doesn't want him to participate in any affairs of the organization. This contradictory psychology made Pierce fall into a brief contemplation. When Jonathan was attacked, other Hydra branch personnel were also present. According to Jonathan's current physical changes, if other branches are interested in investigating, it will be difficult to conceal it. So, Jonathan has been pulled into this vortex now, and it is too late to get out. Alas, it's difficult, Jonathan, Pierce said after a long silence. I can give you the power to do what you want, but you need to ensure your own safety, and occasionally cooperate with our data department to do some inspections. Jonathan raised his eyebrows. What do you mean, Father? I mean, Pierce explained. For example, for the new company you founded, I will give you certain financial support and human resources. At the same time, I will not ask about some things as long as you do not cross the line. Also, some things, it's time to tell you. Quote. Hearing this, Sitwell and Rumlow exchanged surprised looks. They didn't expect Pierce to make such a decision. Before coming, Pierce had asked Sitwell to go beyond his authority and print all the files about Carol Danvers in the Shield Level 10 files into paper documents, and took them to the ward after sorting them out. And this was just a record at the beginning. Perhaps Jonathan would never know these things in his life. But Pierce finally made a decision. Soon, Jonathan had a detailed personal file about Carol Danvers in his hand, which even detailed her age and where she was, and how many times she had wet her pants. Seeing Jonathan reading the file, Pierce raised his gold-rimmed glasses, then put his hands behind his back, walked slowly to the window sill next to the bed, looked at the scenery outside the window, and slowly said, Jonathan, this world is far from being as simple as you think. Quote, when you were little, you often asked your eldest and second brothers whether there were aliens in this world, and whether there were any special abilities, the people with power. In the past, my answer to you was undoubtedly negative. Quote, but now, I tell you that they do exist, and they are a serious threat to the Earth. This woman named Carol Danvers was originally just a test pilot serving in the former U.S. Air Force. In 1989, she died accidentally during an experiment of the light-speed engine designed by Dr. Wendy Lawson. The energy of this light-speed engine comes from the cosmic cube, which is the blue cubic energy body in the storage box you robbed at that time. But later, we found that there was a huge energy fluctuation in Louisiana, and we quickly sent people to explore. According to the investigation report, we found that there are indeed aliens in the world, and they have formed an empire and ruled some galaxies. The most important one is an empire called Kree. They launched a war against an empire called Skrull. Many Skrull refugees escaped during this war and looked for galaxies to immigrate to. Of course, this is not the most important thing. We also found that Carol Danvers did not die. Instead, she gained unparalleled superpowers from the loss of control of the light-speed engine. This ability allowed her to go to the sky and into the Earth, and she could easily destroy an entire space fleet, but later she disappeared from the Earth for some reason. Quote, at that time, it was difficult for us to characterize her, so we called her File, Surprise, so we also called her Ms. Marvel. Quote, maybe you don't understand why I'm telling you this, Jonathan, but you just need to know that since Ms. Marvel absorbed the energy of the cosmic cube in the light-speed engine, you are the second person who can absorb energy and live well. Quote, when you were unconscious, our technicians detected a large amount of similar energy sources in you. Therefore, we are not sure whether you have obtained the same power as Ms. Marvel, or other abilities, and whether they are controllable or not. So, you want me to. Jonathan, as a father, I just want you to protect yourself, keep your secrets as much as possible, and cooperate with us to do data inspections. The rest is your own plan. Now, your situation may also have attracted the attention of other branches of the organization, Jonathan. You need to grow up. Just when Jonathan ran a few laps and just got his body under control, a familiar-looking Hydra agent who was lurking in S.H.I.E.L.D. suddenly walked in from outside the door. Director, Nick Fury is here and said he wants to visit Jonathan. Pierce's face changed instantly after hearing this, and he winked at Rumlow. Rumlow understood and immediately walked out of the ward and had someone block the door. The Hydra agent outside the door stopped Nick Fury's figure, looking embarrassed. Sorry, Director Fury, the agent said calmly. Director Pierce is accompanying his son who just woke up and said it's not convenient to see guests for the time being. Hearing this, Fury frowned, and a trace of suspicion flashed in his one eye. Although Pierce promoted him to deputy director, the two of them were like close friends regardless of age, and they often got along well. To this situation, there is no reason, could it be that something happened? Thinking of this, he shook the bunch of flowers in his hand and said to the agent, I heard that Jonathan woke up, so I came to visit him. Nothing happened inside, right? Director Pierce and I have a good relationship. I just went in to take a look and will be out soon. But the agent still did not give in. Thank you very much for your concern, Director, but now is the time for family reunion, I hope you can understand. Fury narrowed his single eye, his sharp eyes seemed to penetrate the door of the ward. After years of agent career, he noticed a hint of abnormality, but he couldn't tell what was wrong in a short time. Okay, Fury finally compromised. Please tell Director Pierce that I have been here. If there is any good news, you can call me and tell me. The agent nodded and agreed, watching Fury leave. After making sure that Fury was far away, he returned to the ward and reported the situation to Pierce. Pierce looked uncertain. Fury is a fox, his nose is still as sensitive as ever. If we hadn't blocked the news in time, he might have known it long ago. We must be extra careful. Sitwell suggested. Director, maybe we should arrange for Jonathan to be discharged from the hospital as soon as possible to avoid attracting more attention. Pierce thought for a while and agreed to this suggestion. Okay, Jonathan, how do you feel? Jonathan nodded. No problem, Father. I feel good now and can leave at any time. So, under Pierce's arrangement, Jonathan went through the discharge procedures at a very fast speed. In order to avoid being noticed, they chose a hidden exit to leave the hospital, and also asked someone to pretend to be Jonathan, creating the illusion that Jonathan was still in hospital. At this time, Jonathan had returned home safely. At home, everything in the room was normal, but for some reason, Jonathan always felt a little dazed and unreal. He shook his head and took a deep breath. According to the system's explanation, after the system came into contact with the cosmic cube, the underlying structure was modified, allowing it to descend into the isotope of another world and replace it. The world rules synchronized the data for him, preserved the memory and existence of the original body, and created a new matching body for his descent. As for the original body, it was cut by the power of the world and stuffed into other spaces or unrelated storylines. At this point, Jonathan had to sigh at the tyranny of the space gem. While opening the system's plug-in, it also helped him open the back door. God Loki, I did it. When he returns, this new body will return with him, turning into pure soul power and returning to Jonathan's Marvel World body. Finally, after the system compares the data one by one, all the data of the Black Robe world are recorded into his own body. In this way, when he uses the double-through world gate in the future, Jonathan can go to the Black Robe world with the same body, perfectly solving the body problem. So, after returning home, Jonathan couldn't wait to return to his training ground and began to test the accuracy of data entry and the consistency of the main body. The scene changed. After sending Jonathan home safely, Pierce immediately summoned his subordinates and held a secret meeting in a safe house. The participants included Sidwell, Rumlow and several core members of the Hydra faction. Everyone, Pierce said straight to the point. We are now facing an unprecedented opportunity. With the abilities Jonathan has now acquired, he may become a great help to our organization. Come on, Sidwell, analyze Jonathan's physical examination report. Sidwell moistened his throat with a sip of water and read. According to preliminary research, Jonathan's blood contains unknown substances. They have extremely strong recovery and tolerance. If we can analyze this substance, maybe we can artificially create super soldiers. Quote. Not only that, we can also extract the ingredients to make a drug that slows down aging. This drug, I believe everyone knows that once it is announced, it will definitely cause madness in the upper echelons. Quote. Really, this is really great. Our faction is saved. But, Pierce raised his hand to calm the noise. From now on, we must act cautiously. Fury may have begun to suspect, so we can't alert him. But Director, Jonathan's situation is being closely watched by people in other branches. Many spies have come to inquire about it in the past few days. Sooner or later, they will find out about this matter. Yes, if Baron Strucker and Viper knew Jonathan's true situation, with their usual style of doing things, they would definitely not be able to hold back, and would even do whatever it takes to tie Jonathan back for human experiments. Quote. The serious Rumlow pondered for a while and then spoke. People are not plants. As he watched Jonathan grow up, he naturally did not want Jonathan to be targeted by other factions. I know, so we must hold on to Jonathan before he has the ability to protect himself and try our best to cooperate with him. Not only for the faction, but also for his growth, it will be more beneficial for us. Everyone present knew that Pierce's words were meant to protect his son as much as possible, but Pierce's approach did not infringe on the interests of the organization. And all the core members were promoted by Pierce all the way, and they followed Pierce, so they naturally had no objections. Next, it depends on how Jonathan plans. Quote, here, since someone specially created the illusion that Jonathan was hospitalized, Jonathan stayed at home for half a month before being discharged, wrapped in fake bandages, and gradually appeared in the public's field of vision. Soon after Jonathan was discharged, Dr. Banner disappeared, and a huge green figure appeared in the SHIELD files, temporarily attracting Fury's attention to India on the other side. Time flies, and in the blink of an eye, another half a month has passed. Jonathan's bandage has been taken off, and he has dismissed some doubts from the outside world with the excuse of strong recovery ability. And during this period, Jonathan rarely showed up in the outside world, but he showed up at home and in several clubs around him, and cooperated with Hydra to do a physical data check. However, when doing the check, Jonathan was particularly careful. He did not activate his active abilities such as energy absorption and breath holding. The only thing left for Hydra was a super self-healing ability. But Jonathan's ability is unique to him, not just a simple mutation, so Hydra's experts can only study Jonathan's cells frantically, but they can't find a clue. Therefore, Jonathan also has enough space to arrange his own affairs. That day, Jonathan drove a supercar back to his concept technology company. In order to avoid being seen, Jonathan walked into the company building and skillfully followed his memory and went straight to the secret laboratory in the basement. In a corner of the brightly lit laboratory, Dr. Stern and a group of external experts were concentrating on studying a strange and gorgeous plant. The surrounding experimental tables were filled with bottles and jars of various colors. Dr. Stern, Jonathan called softly. Hearing the voice, Dr. Stern's eyes flashed with displeasure. When he looked up and saw that it was Jonathan, the displeasure on his face disappeared instantly, and then it was replaced by a surprised expression. "Ah, boss, long time no see. I was just looking for you. I have made some new breakthroughs in my recent research, which is about plant resistance." Jonathan nodded and asked Dr. Stern to come closer. "Doctor, I came here this time to discuss some important things with you, but before that, confidentiality must be done well." Dr. Stern's expression instantly became serious when he heard it. He put down the experimental equipment in his hand and looked directly into Jonathan's eyes. "Of course, boss, I always abide by professional ethics. No matter what it is, I will never leak it out. I will ask all the assistants to leave now." After everyone left the laboratory, Jonathan took out 3 small bottles from his pocket. One was blue, one was fluorescent, and one was dark green. "Doctor, I brought these back from a special place. You can call them compound number 5, temporary compound number 5, and virus samples." Jonathan handed the 2 small bottles to Dr. Sten. Compound number 5 can stimulate the latent energy in the human body and randomly generate superpowers, but its injection survival rate is low. Generally speaking, the success rate is high only when injected in childhood. But the randomness I'm talking about is not absolute. People's psychological obsessions or fears may affect the directional derivation of abilities. Then this temporary compound number 5 and virus sample, as the name suggests, only have a temporary effective time of 24 hours. The virus sample is a countermeasure against the above 2 substances, making them invalid. Dr. Sten took the vial, looked at the liquid inside curiously, and then couldn't wait to take a piece of film with a microscope for observation. When he carefully observed it with a microscope, the expression on his face instantly became extremely shocked. This is incredible." He raised his head and looked at Jonathan in disbelief. "I have never seen this kind of molecular structure and sequence. Compared with them, all the research I have done is weak. If we can really master it, we can even replicate the feat of the super soldier serum." Just then, Dr. Stern seemed to remember something, and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. "Speaking of which, a strange guy recently contacted me through the research link I left on the internet before. He claimed that he had turned into a green and strong monster and wanted to find a drug that could suppress this state." Dr. Stern shook his head and continued. "To be honest, I had no idea about this, but now." He raised the vial in his hand, his eyes flashing with excitement. "With this thing, I think my research may have a major breakthrough. The characteristics of this compound may solve his problem." Jonathan was also surprised to hear this. He didn't expect that Banner had already contacted Dr. Stern at this time, so it would be easy. At the beginning, he wanted to pull Dr. Banner into his company for research. Now that he has the means of contact, it is only a matter of time to achieve his goal. "Doctor, you can continue to keep in touch with him. You may not have a very clear understanding of the effect of the injection of compound No. 5. I happen to have 2 examples here. Let's find a new one." Laboratory. Quote. Dr. Stern was very curious about Jonathan's words. He followed Jonathan to the end of the corridor. Since Jonathan didn't hire many people, this laboratory was not open at ordinary times. It was a good place to store things. He opened the door, looked around, and after making sure that no one else was present, he closed the door. Jonathan slowly raised his right hand and made a waving motion. The next second, under Dr. Stern's stunned gaze, 2 huge sleeping cabins appeared in front of him out of thin air. The 2 sleeping cabins looked very technological, emitting a faint blue light, and there seemed to be some special liquid flowing slowly inside. This, quote, Dr. Stern stuttered when he saw this shocking scene. Jonathan did not answer immediately, but motioned Dr. Stern to come closer. When they walked to the sleeping cabin, through the transparent part of the cabin, Dr. Stern saw the scene inside and gasped. In each of the 2 sleeping cabins, there was a person lying. One had long hair and a beard, was muscular, and looked very rogue. The other wore a blue uniform similar to that of a superhero. Both of them looked about the same age. They are, Dr. Stern asked softly, these 2 people or receptors of compound number 5. The one on the left was injected in his youth and has extremely strong physical fitness and defense. He can fire energy radiation cannons from his chest. He can be called Soldier Boy. The one on the right is called Homelander. He was injected with compound number 5 since childhood. His ability, Doctor, you should have read the comic books published by DC. His ability is a weakened version of Superman. Quote, this is incredible. Due to their special physical conditions, the sleeping chamber is filled with a large amount of nerve paralysis toxins. At the same time, they are hypnotized before entering the sleeping chamber, and their memories are trapped in a loop to ensure that they will not wake up. Quote, Doctor, all you need to do is to understand these 3 things thoroughly, and it would be best if you can achieve mass production. As night fell, Hell's Kitchen in New York was shrouded in a haze, in Kingpin's luxurious office. Viper and Baron Strucker sat opposite Kingpin, their eyes wandering over the burly body of the underworld emperor. Kingpin's white suit with a pink collar hides a formidable body of muscles. Even when he is sitting, he gives people a sense of oppression ready to burst out at any time. Mr. Kingpin, Viper, with a wicked face, twisted his waist, his mouth painted with black lip mud opened and closed, and his voice was full of irresistible charm. We have a business to discuss with you. King ignored the femme fatale in front of him, his sharp eyes narrowed slightly, and he said in a deep voice. Oh, tell me about it. Baron Strucker on the side took over the conversation. There is a man named Jonathan Pierce. We need you to catch him alive. Kingpin sneered. Is it worth your 2 coming here just to capture one person? You think too highly of me, don't you? Baron Stark smiled sinisterly. Of course it's not just that. We know you've always wanted to expand your sphere of influence in New York. If you can complete this commission, we can transfer some of our industries to you. Hearing this slightly more important sentence, Jin Bing's eyes suddenly became playful. Tell me more about it. Baron Stark took out a document from his briefcase and pushed it in front of Jin Bing. This is the list of industries we are going to transfer, including several nightclubs, casinos, and some legal businesses. These are enough to expand your sphere of influence by at least 30%. Jin Bing took the document and read it carefully. After a moment, he raised his head, his eyes flashing with an inexplicable light. Interesting, but why do you care so much about Jonathan? According to your Hydra way of doing things, you rarely ask others to do things for you. Seeing this, Viper and Baron Strucker exchanged glances, and Viper stuck out his tongue. He has some special abilities, we need to study it. Hearing this, Kingpin sneered. Study, you want to torture people to death. This is your normal state. Quote, Mr. Kingpin is joking. This person is very important to us. Since we are willing to pay such a high price, don't you want to agree? Kingpin was silent for a while, then stood up, his burly body cast a shadow in the office. I accept this deal, but I have a condition. Baron Strucker asked vigilantly. What condition? Quote, King Bing showed a ferocious smile. I want to personally meet this Jonathan and see what's so special about him that is worth you Hydra's fuss. Quote, King Bing's eyes were gleaming. As the underground emperor of New York, he had long dealt with the notorious Hydra since World War II. This organization, which never gets up early without profit, can bring back amazing gains every time it goes out. This time, King Bing also wants to see what kind of surprise this is. And Hydra is also considering it. To be honest, they didn't pay too much attention to Jonathan's situation at the beginning, that is, the internal spies reported some abnormal situations to them. Due to these circumstances, the potential disputes between Hydra factions cannot be put on the surface, so they can only start from other aspects to obtain the intelligence they want. But they don't have the idea of letting others share a piece of the pie. So, Baron Stark frowned and said, this is not in our plan. Before he finished speaking, King Bing interrupted him. Either accept my conditions, or there is no room for negotiation. Quote. Viper and Baron Strucker looked at each other and finally nodded helplessly. King Bing sat back in his chair with satisfaction. Very good. I will send my most capable men, Bullseye and Erica, to do this. You just need to tell me, where is this Jonathan now? Viper took out a photo with residual heat from his leather pants and handed it to King Bing. This is what he looks like. The last time he appeared was at Concept Technology Company. And you must act quickly, his identity is not simple. King Bing took the photo, shook it, and then looked at it carefully for a while and sneered. Don't worry, no matter who it is, he can't run away. When Viper and Baron Strucker left, King Bing stood in front of the window, overlooking the night view of New York, and then pressed the notification device in his hand. Ask Bullseye and Erica to see me, we have work to do. At the same time, Jonathan was walking out of the patent office building, holding a thick document in his hand. Before returning to the Marvel world, Jonathan stuffed some of the perfect black technology products of the Black Robe Patrol into the system space, including positioning devices and heat insulation materials commonly used by superheroes. After returning, Jonathan planned to make these products that have not yet appeared in the Marvel world, or have not yet become mainstream, as the company's first products. In this way, before launching future heavyweight products, it can also be known among the masses in advance. So Jonathan planned to register the product at the patent office first, protect his exclusive copyright first, and by the way, let his shell company operate and earn some operating funds. After doing all this, Jonathan felt relieved. The plan in his mind was basically implemented, and now he could slow down the pace a little, wait for the event to be triggered. Just a few days ago, he received an electronic invitation to a bachelor party from Tony Stark to all the young men in New York, and the date of the invitation is tonight. When Jonathan came to Marvel, his predecessor had also dealt with Tony Stark, but this dealing was limited to sharing the measurements of the New York Times girl. In reality, he had only met him briefly a few times, and he was not very familiar with him. So, taking this opportunity, Jonathan planned to meet Tony while having fun and get familiar with him, so that he could participate in the upcoming Iron Man plot in the future. Maybe he could interfere and get what he wanted. Not long after, Jonathan parked the supercar, got out of the car and was about to walk to the party venue. The scene changed, and Bullseye was squatting on the top of a nearby high-rise building with a sniper rifle, squinting one eye to observe the scope, with a confident sneer on the corner of his mouth. Just a casual look, Bullseye pulled the trigger. This time was just when Jonathan turned the corner, and a barely audible gunshot pierced the air. Swoosh! The bullet whizzed out and went straight to Jonathan's thigh. The boss Kingpin's mission was to capture him alive, not to shoot him in the head. It was such a simple job, but Bullseye didn't know why he had to call Erica. It was a waste of effort. However, to Bullseye's surprise, Jonathan at the corner of the street seemed to have eyes behind him, and he easily turned sideways, seemingly, coincidentally, dodged the shot. Missed. Bullseye tilted his head, staring at the bullet hole in the wall, analyzing the trajectory. Bullseye, have you been around women for too long? Your shooting skills are so rusty. Erica's voice came from the communicator clamped on his neck. At this moment, she was moving, approaching Jonathan's position at a very fast speed, and her black tights blended into the night. With just a light jump, holding the spike fork in her fingers, she landed lightly in a blind spot, looking for the best position to attack. Soon, she saw the bullet hole shot into the wall by the Bullseye, which was still smoking. But what puzzled her was that Jonathan's figure, who was originally there, had disappeared from the spot as if he had evaporated from the earth. Erica, he's behind you. Hearing the urgent reminder from the Bullseye in the communicator, Erica turned her head quickly. Oh, beauty, this outfit is quite unique. Are you looking for me? Erica was shocked. She didn't expect the target to appear behind her without anyone noticing. She turned around quickly and took Jonathan's throat with the fork in her hand. Bleeding, shock, combined with the hand's one-stop golden wound medicine, the person was shipped, undamaged. The kidnapping technique was extremely skillful. Seeing this, Jonathan's eyes flashed with a hint of teasing, and he lightly dodged sideways. Are you in such a hurry? Beauty, I haven't introduced myself yet, is this too presumptuous? I'm not a casual man. Jonathan's voice was completely free of panic, and his words were full of ridicule. Erica ignored Jonathan. In the past, these talkative mission targets were all arrogant and didn't know their own position. For such people, just let them shut up. Erica continued to launch a fierce attack. Her sharp movements were like flowing water, and each attack was fatal and tricky. The thorn fork drew cold light under the cold light of the street lamp, and it was close to Jonathan's vitals. However, Jonathan's reaction was faster than Erica imagined. His figure was as erratic as a ghost, and he was at ease. He could always, coincidentally, avoid the attack at the critical moment. At this time, Erica frowned and felt a little uneasy in her heart. This man's movements were really weird. The assessment of the target's combat power during the mission today seemed too conservative. So Erica sank her expression and swung the thorn fork again, bursting out all her strength to counterattack. But Erica's movements were obviously too slow in Jonathan's eyes. In the black robe world, fighting the storm, abusing Zubao, and fighting with various superhumans, which one was not extremely fast. On the contrary, returning to Marvel, it is really a bit uncomfortable. Jonathan suddenly flashed behind Erica. Erica reacted very quickly and wanted to turn around and fight back immediately, but she was shocked to find that Jonathan was no longer there. What a fast speed! Erica's pupils shrank, and she murmured, looking around for the possible location of Jonathan. Beautiful, thank you for the compliment. I'm here. Jonathan's sudden voice came from another direction. Erica turned around again, but missed again. This situation repeated itself, and Erica felt like she was fighting a ghost. Her breathing began to become rapid, and fine beads of sweat oozed from her forehead. She found that no matter how hard she tried to attack, she could not touch Jonathan at all. The speed of the two is not at the same level at all. Just when Jonathan was playing with Erica, Bullseye was staring at the position where the two were fighting in the distance, frowning, and his fingers unconsciously stroked the trigger of the sniper rifle. Whenever he saw a chance, he would shoot without hesitation and knock Jonathan down. But the situation was too chaotic now, and he couldn't lock on to the target. What the hell is Erica doing? Bullseye cursed in a low voice. After working together for a long time, he had never seen Erica in such a mess. With Jonathan's speed, even if he had a strong ability to capture dynamic vision, he could only barely see a trace of afterimage. Back to the battlefield. At this time, Erica's breath was a little disordered after the high-intensity continuous attack, and her movements began to slow down, losing her previous sharpness. In contrast, Jonathan was still able to control himself and even had the leisure to joke. "Why, are you tired?" Jonathan asked with a smile. "Do you want to eat some oysters to replenish it?" Erica clenched her teeth and forced herself to calm down. She realized that she had fallen into Jonathan's rhythm and had to change her strategy. Taking a deep breath, Erica stopped attacking and switched to a defensive posture. After holding out for so long, after all, it's time for Bullseye to show his strength, right? "Oh, are you going to change your tactics?" Jonathan raised his eyebrows. Just then, a bullet whizzed in and headed straight for Jonathan's neck. Bullseye in the distance finally took advantage of the pause between the two and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Jonathan did not dodge the bullet coming from behind, but seemed to be stunned in place, just taking the bullet. But surprisingly, Erica noticed that Jonathan's eyes and face did not change at all, as if the bullet that hit her was just an insignificant hair. It was even more terrifying from Bullseye's perspective. He found that the bullet seemed to be blocked and buffered by something invisible after hitting Jonathan, and then fell to the ground like that. Jonathan's clothes didn't even have a hole. Bullseye had only seen this kind of bullet-blocking situation in his boss Kingpin. He was huge but not fat. More than 90% of his body was muscle. He could punch through a wall with his bare hands, and the density of his muscles could clamp the bullets when he met them. But Jonathan's situation was something Bullseye could not imagine at all. He had only seen such special abilities in the hands of the ninjas of the hand at most. And those ninjas did not have such a body protection effect. "Wow, I almost let you succeed," Jonathan said with a smile, but his eyes judged based on the traces of the bullet path in the air, and then accurately cast in the direction of Bullseye. But Erica did not mean to continue talking nonsense with Jonathan. She took the opportunity to launch a surprise attack, pinched the thorn fork and pointed it directly at Jonathan's heart. However, Jonathan's reaction was faster. He grabbed the thorn fork and easily took it away. Then, in Erica's extremely astonished eyes, Jonathan bent the solid steel fork lightly, and it broke like rotten wood. Sorry, can I borrow it for a moment? Jonathan picked up the broken fork and threw it out in a parabola. Swish swish. A crisp sound came from a distance, followed by Bullseye's exclamation. The broken fork hit his sniper rifle accurately, smashing the gun head. Bullseye looked at the scrapped weapon in his hand in disbelief, and for a moment he forgot to run away. When he came to his senses, he found that Jonathan had stood in front of him without knowing when, and his face still had that disturbing smile. This is the top floor of the 5th floor, how did he get up there? Hello, Mr. Sniper. Mind chatting with me? Bullseye suddenly retreated to a safe distance, and at the same time pulled out a large dagger from his waist, and then shot at Jonathan with an extreme crosshair. Don't be nervous, I just want to ask a few questions. Jonathan put his hands behind his back and absorbed all the kinetic energy of the dagger. Then, a silver light flashed in his eyes. He pounced forward and easily pinched Bullseye, pinning him to the ground. For example, who sent you here? Bullseye gritted his teeth and remained silent. As a younger brother, if he directly betrayed his boss Kingpin, he would be stabbed and stabbed with peanuts. Moreover, he didn't know what the purpose of the boss's assignment was, and he really didn't know if anyone would cooperate with his boss. Seeing that he couldn't pry open Bullseye's mouth, Jonathan's eyes gradually moved to the tightly wrapped cold hat on Bullseye's head and sighed slightly. In Marvel, whoever wears a cold hat in the middle of summer is most likely to cover up some obvious signs. Who has such obvious signs on their heads that need to be covered? Combined with the black tights of this female assassin, plus the characteristics of holding a steel fork as a weapon, it is not difficult to guess that these two people are the top thugs under Kingpin. Erica and Bullseye. Actually, it doesn't matter if I don't say it, I think I've already guessed it. At this moment, Erica rushed upstairs silently and quickly appeared behind Jonathan, with a small pistol in her hand. Seeing that she was getting closer, Erica pulled the trigger without hesitation, and the bullet went straight to Jonathan's hind legs. However, to her shock, Jonathan turned around the moment the bullet was fired. Buzz. Erica stared at her bullet in amazement as it briefly floated in the air for a moment, and then simply fell to the ground. This is impossible. Erica shouted. Jonathan smiled slightly. In this world, nothing is impossible. As he said that, he waved his hand lightly, and Erica felt an invisible force pushing her away, falling heavily to the ground and struggling to get up. Bullseye took the opportunity to break free and stumbled towards Erica. The two looked at each other, and saw deep fear in each other's eyes. I suggest you go back and tell your boss, or the people behind the scenes. Jonathan's voice came from behind them. If you want to see me, you might as well come to me in person. Playing this kind of hide-and-seek game is really too childish. Seeing that Jonathan did not show any killing intention, Erica and Bullseye did not stay for long and quickly disappeared into the night. Jonathan stood there and watched them leave, and the smile on his face gradually faded. It seems that some people can't sit still. Jonathan muttered to himself, with a sharp light flashing in his eyes. Kingpin had no grudges against him, and he had only recently become active in the public eye. With the relationship between the two people being so far apart, he did not believe that such a gangster emperor would end up against him, a little character, for no reason. The most likely possibility is that Kingpin received a commission from some organization. If nothing unexpected happens, it is estimated that other factions of Hydra have coveted him. The reason for letting these two go back is that Jonathan's company has just been established, and he naturally doesn't want to get into a life-and-death relationship with Kingpin and be targeted. The second reason is to wait and see if there are any changes in the future. Putting aside his thoughts for the time being, Jonathan opened the electronic invitation and walked into the party. Tony Stark holds a bachelor party almost every year, and this time he chose his own Sky Garden as the venue. The garden is brightly lit inside and outside, and there are celebrities and ladies in the toasts. Due to the delay just now, Jonathan arrived at the scene half an hour late. Since Tony Stark never has the habit of waiting for all the guests to arrive, the party has already started early. Not far away, Tony, the protagonist of the bachelor party, has been drunk by the guests, his cheeks are flushed unnaturally, and his hair, which is usually combed meticulously, has become messy. He held a glass of champagne in his hand, staggering through the crowd, occasionally exchanging a few words with familiar guests, and occasionally flirting with a gorgeous girl. Then he held one in each hand, both of whom were fashion cover girls this week and last week, and followed by several long-legged girls who wanted to get rich overnight and dress themselves up. Once any of them covered themselves with the quilt of this playboy, perhaps they would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of their lives. But unfortunately, Tony Stark only favored the left and right tonight. At this moment, Tony, who was walking towards the guest area, suddenly fell on a man standing in the corner. The man was wearing a well-tailored suit and was chatting with his female secretary Potts. His black hair stood out among the many golden brown waves. Wardfake. Potts. How dare you flirt with my Potts? Tony squinted his eyes in dissatisfaction, recalling his drunken and sluggish memories. He didn't know why, but he always felt that this face was familiar, but he couldn't remember where it came from. I wondered where I had seen him before. I couldn't think of it, so I just stopped thinking about it. He first temporarily sent away the female companions on both sides and walked towards the man leisurely. Hey, man. Tony interrupted the conversation between the man and Potts loudly, attracting the attention of both of them. Have I seen you before? Your face looks familiar. Tony, this is from the newly listed Concept Technology Group. Just as Potts wanted to help the man explain, Tony suddenly stretched out a finger and then directly pressed it against the man's chest. I recognize you. How come your face looks so much like that, Jonathan Pierce? Tony frowned and tried to recall, and suddenly a flash of inspiration came to him, and he snapped his fingers violently. I remember. It doesn't seem right. He is definitely not as strong as you, and his face is not as rosy. I remember that he shared the measurements of a certain actress with me. Could it be that you are his cousin? Is there a possibility? I am Jonathan Pierce. Are you sure? Tony looked carefully. He vaguely remembered that Jonathan seemed to be about the same height as him before. How come he is obviously taller than him now? Moreover, the other party's strong and refined muscles are directly revealed through the folds of his suit. No, this change is really huge. Tony felt that the Wing Chun he learned from the Chinese master might not be enough for Jonathan to fight with one hand. Thinking of this, Tony decided to temporarily let go of Jonathan's flirting with Potts and started chatting. That was a really interesting chat. But, man, where have you been these years? I don't think I've heard from you in the circle for a long time. I've been busy with fitness, meditation, and so on. Do you want to join us? Jonathan looked at Tony's thin figure under his suit and couldn't help but joked. Only by keeping a good body can you replenish your kidneys. Hearing this, Tony raised his eyebrows and showed an unbelievable expression. What, are you serious? Come on, those boring things take up too much time and energy. And, I, the great Tony Stark, have good kidneys and my spirit is still very strong. Look at me, I indulge in sensual pleasures every day, but I'm still living well. And I'm the world's richest man and a top inventor. Health, that's something that only old people need to worry about. Tony shook his champagne and took a big sip. But you have a good figure. What's the name of your personal trainer? If she's a blonde, I might sign up to give it a try. By the way, what kind of crooked company were you talking about, Potts? Tony scratched his ears and looked at Potts, who was speechless at the moment. Sorry, Mr. Jonathan, my boss is drunk and may not be able to express himself well. Potts brushed his hair and said to Jonathan embarrassedly. It's Concept Technology Company, boss. After hearing Tony's words, Jonathan's mouth twitched, and then shook his head helplessly. As we all know, Tony Stark's foul mouth is recognized by the Marvel world. Give him a mouth, maybe you can get a day of depression, and you can't even refute it. Because he is not only a playboy, but also a genius inventor, a super rich man and other titles. In addition to Bruce from the DC next door, there is also a poor charlatan who can barely hold up the scene. Maybe for Tony, his company is indeed a small karami, and it is normal to look down on it. But this mouth, it's really cheap. If it weren't because he is Tony Stark, Jonathan really wanted to go up and give him a punch. Oh, so, this is your company. Tony shook his body, tilted his head, and exhaled a strong smell of alcohol, which made Potts frown. What exactly does it do? Come, tell the great Tony Stark. Maybe he can give you some advice. Well, we are targeting more fields. Now we mainly launch auxiliary materials, such as superheat-resistant leather and other products, but we will focus on biotechnology in the future. Man, to be honest, civilian and military mechanical technology is much more popular than some useless biological field. Look, last year, Stark Industries sold more than tens of thousands of mechanical prostheses. I'm not saying that your vision may be limited to this. Ah. Tony's mustache was raised, and he became more and more excited with the help of alcohol, until his throat suddenly felt sweet, and he bent over with his hands on his stomach and began to vomit. Seeing this, Potts quickly pulled Tony away, fearing that the vomit would get on Jonathan, and then used his hand to steady Tony's shaky body. While supporting him, Potts apologized to Jonathan, and the embarrassment on his face became more intense. Sorry, my boss is like this, talking nonsense after drinking, it's easy to lose control. I'll send him back first, and I won't bother you anymore. Pepper, I'm not drunk, help me back. I want to continue drinking, my two big beauties are still waiting for me to favor them. Tony used his hand to break away from Potts's hand, supported a green plant beside him, and was about to go back. Unexpectedly, a man with a beard who was half a neck taller than him blocked his way, and one hand was on his shoulder. Tony, why are you so drunk? You have to attend the Jericho Strategic Missile Exhibition with the military at the end of the month. You can't be so lax. The military is urging you to do it. Uncle Obadiah, why are you here? Don't worry, don't you still believe in Stark's manufacturing level? That's a missile costing $500 million US. Which of my weapons was not sold out by the military before? That being said, we still need to prepare more. Have fun in moderation. Who is this? Obadiah looked at Potts on the side in confusion. He is the CEO of Concept Technology, the latest listed company. Oh, so, organize the schedule for the end of the month, the sooner the better. Take Tony back first. Obadiah didn't care when he heard it. He simply turned his head and looked at Jonathan, shaking his head slightly. The subtext was that he wanted to get rid of him. From his turbid and gloomy eyes, Jonathan could see the hidden ambition and a touch of ruthlessness. As expected of the villain in the early stage, he does look quite imposing, a perfect rebellion. Jonathan silently looked away, then took a long step and moved back to the guest area. Today, his mission to get acquainted with Tony had been accomplished, but he did not expect to get a surprise. If nothing unexpected happened, the military exhibition proposed by Obadiah at the end of the month would be the beginning of the main plot of Iron Man. At this time, Tony would be kidnapped to a cave by the Ten Commandments gang specially found by Obadiah, and forced to make missiles with another scientist, Ethan. The first generation of Iron Man's armor was made by Tony and Ethan under the condition of pretending to obey but secretly disobeying, and finally escaped. After receiving this news, Jonathan gradually formed a plan in his mind. After eating and drinking in the guest area and teasing a few big horses, he left the bachelor party and drove away in a supercar. Driving the car into a street with few people, Jonathan stopped at a corner. After throwing a dozen pieces of paper with room numbers in his pocket out of the window, he found his cell phone and dialed an encrypted number. Following the address provided on the phone, Jonathan quickly drove into a secluded road and finally stopped in front of an inconspicuous office building. This is one of the secret bases opened by his cheap father Pierce in New York, and it is also the gathering headquarters of Pierce's Hydra faction. Behind an inconspicuous sculpture inside the door, Jonathan pressed a hidden mechanism and then walked into the mechanical elevator to reach the inner core. Soon, Jonathan saw his cheap father who had just finished dealing with things in the office. Jonathan, the party should not be over yet. Pierce rarely showed his true colors in his spare time and teased his youngest son. You know, Jonathan has given up these entertainments and turned to fitness since 3 years ago. Pierce himself also felt very strange. Why did Jonathan go when Tony Stark sent an invitation letter this time? In fact, Dad, I'm just showing off in front of the public. I came here this time because I have something important to tell you. Some people can't sit still. Before I went to the party, someone came to attack me, without a killer move. I guess they wanted to tie me up. As he said that, Jonathan revised, "What happened just now?" "Oh, they can attack you right under our noses." Hearing this, Pierce's eyes suddenly became serious. "How come I don't know? Rumlow and Sitwell didn't inform me either. Obviously, it's another faction that's against me." Before Jonathan said this, he had already thought of the result. He came to Marvel and became Pierce's son, and this identity cannot be changed in any way. And once Hydra explodes, Nick Fury will definitely be implicated with his cruelty. Therefore, if Hydra wants to continue to exist, it must be guided back on track, and the usual quarrels between factions must be turned into a united front against the outside world. If you want to achieve unity, then integrating factions is a prerequisite, and taking action against other factions is the first step. No matter whether they have done it or not, put the blame on them first. Dad, don't you know that for so many years, the ambitions of the old woman Viper and Strucker are so great that they want to annex other factions? Don't you know? Is it possible that there are also traitors among our factions? Pierce heard this and adjusted his glasses. There is an unwritten rule among our Hydra factions: non-aggression and common struggle for the supreme leader of Hydra. I have blocked the news a long time ago. The only two who may attack you are the two of them. Zemo has not made any moves for so many years, it is probably not him. And for so many years, you have been tolerant of their temptations many times, but in the end it is still the same result. Pierce frowned. To be honest, he has been fed up with these two for a long time, and he has helped them clean up their asses many times for the sake of the organization to ensure the concealment of Hydra. Since they have done this, why don't we do something more radical than them and directly merge the two factions and make them submit to our own people? Anyway, these two traitors have long been unable to restrain themselves and will pounce on us sooner or later. Besides, Dad, you don't have to worry about not having enough strength to deal with it. I found that I seem to have gained a new ability that is extremely similar to the ability of Ms. Marvel. What? Pierce frowned slightly. His tone revealed obvious suspicion, and his heart was alarmed. You said you suddenly gained new abilities. Pierce repeated slowly, looking at his young son in front of him with sharp eyes, and then narrowed his eyes. When exactly did it happen? Just the night before last. Pierce nodded thoughtfully. He recalled that a few days ago, he had just asked the top scientists in the organization to do a comprehensive examination of Jonathan. At that time, Jonathan's so-called super cells remained intact, and no matter how they operated, the scientists could not parse out any useful information from them. But now, there is a new discovery all of a sudden. This is too coincidental. Thinking of this, Pierce decided to listen to Jonathan's explanation before making a decision. In fact, Dad, this new ability of mine seems to be passively generated. Based on my observations and experiments over the past 2 days, I found that I can absorb and store some energy, such as light energy, electrical energy, and even physical kinetic energy. Pierce narrowed his eyes and quickly weighed various possibilities in his mind. Energy absorption. It doesn't sound too outrageous. Captain Marvel had similar abilities before, but he needed more details to be sure. How does it work specifically? Are there any restrictions? Pierce asked. Jonathan shook his head. This ability is not as powerful as Ms. Marvel. It has an upper limit. After exceeding a certain threshold, it will enter a relatively saturated state. However, after absorbing energy, I can release the energy again. Pierce nodded slightly. What else? I seem to have gained some fragmentary predictive abilities. When Jonathan said this, the air seemed to freeze for a moment. Pierce's expression became more serious. If he could accept the ability to estimate energy absorption, the predictive ability was a bit too incredible. Prediction. Pierce repeated again, his tone full of doubt. Jonathan, are you sure you are not kidding? Pierce fell into deep thought. As the leader of Hydra for many years, even if the person in front of him was his youngest son, he would not be completely convinced by these words alone. He decided to test it. Then, Pierce spoke slowly. Can you tell me what you predicted? Jonathan seemed to have expected this question, and he first thought about the original plot in his mind. There may be a lot of details that are different between Marvel movies and the real world. If the details are different, it will be over. So Jonathan planned to give a rough idea to increase credibility. My predictions are not specific details, but some vague and fragmented fragments. We will implement a project called Insight Project in the future, and we seem to have a special force that has been brainwashed in some way, codenamed Winter Soldier. Hearing this, Pierce's pupils shrank slightly. Only he, Rumlow, Sitwell and other core members know the content of the Insight Project, and it has long been included in the top-secret files of Hydra. And Viper and Baron Strucker are responsible for the Winter Soldier project, with division of labor and cooperation and sharing of results. And all of this was proposed and established by Cobra, the chief scientist of Hydra, but this scientist is usually mysterious and usually only communicates with each other through electronic information. Jonathan. Pierce's expression suddenly became serious. You'd better tell me the truth. Where did you get this top-secret information? Was it Viper, or Baron Strucker? Do you think anyone would tell me this level of secrets? I've already said, these are all seen through the ability of prophecy. Pierce fell silent after hearing this. He needed time to digest this information and assess the possible risks. If what Jonathan said was true, then this ability would undoubtedly be a great help to Hydra, but if this was just a carefully designed scam. I need time to verify your statement, Pierce finally said. Before that, don't tell anyone about this, including your two brothers. I will arrange further inspections and tests. Hearing this, Jonathan held his head speechlessly. He said this himself, and still doubted. This old man's occupational disease is strong, and it is difficult to deceive. Besides, Jonathan, why did you tell me such an important thing only now? It was triggered a few days ago. After I verified the authenticity, I rushed here without stopping. Most importantly, I said this just to tell you that we don't have to worry about the counterattack of other factions. You just need to focus all your attention on the annexation of factions. Our goal has always been to plan various conspiracies in this small world. Controlling the government, manipulating finance, influencing public opinion. These are indeed important. But after all, we are just around a small circle sun. From World War II to the present, our organization has been in the dark and has not been able to come out to the light. We have been criticized by thousands of people and have been scolded by people. Quote, instead of hiding, it is better to give it a try, whitewash it, and rush to the sea of stars. You know, the fragments I encountered are not only our Hydra, but also more threats and invasions from aliens. Remember the alien empire you told me about some time ago? Jonathan felt a little dry in the mouth, so he walked to the other end of the room and took out 2 glasses and a bottle of fine Scotch whiskey from the wine cabinet. As he poured the wine, he continued. Think about it, if an alien race like the Skrulls did not find a planet suitable for immigration, what would they do? He handed Pierce a glass of wine. They would definitely choose to take root on Earth and disguise themselves as ordinary humans. In fact, I suspect that this may have already happened. Pierce took the glass and gently shook the amber liquid, thinking. You mean, yes. Jonathan sat down in the chair opposite Pierce. The Skrulls are much more threatening than we thought. They have the ability to perfectly imitate anyone, including appearance, voice, and memory. Imagine if they have infiltrated our government, military, and even Hydra. Jonathan stood up and looked directly at Pierce. That's why Hydra's whitewashing plan must be accelerated. We need to appear in the public eye with a positive identity and become the backbone of Earth's defense. Only in this way can we obtain the necessary resources and support to fight potential alien threats. To be honest, Jonathan has always felt that Hydra is an organization with great development potential. In terms of loyalty, development speed, and infiltration, it is far ahead of S.H.I.E.L.D. Therefore, since Jonathan traveled through time, he has not been sad, but has been positive about the development of Hydra. But the biggest problem of Hydra is that it likes to be self-contained and likes to play its own conspiracies and tricks in its comfort zone. They are complacent when they get a little bit of profit, and they keep trying to provoke the bottom line of people who are stronger than themselves. So, taking advantage of the opportunity now, Jonathan said all his thoughts. If his cheap father can't figure it out, then he will sort it out himself. Although he is usually lazy, he wants to solve all the problems that hinder him once and for all. Think about it, Dad, instead of playing house with a few kittens, you should decide to revive the government and show the true meaning of Hydra. Isn't it good to go out of the galaxy and rule the planet? Pierce didn't expect that his youngest son had so many opinions about the organization and fell into a long silence for a while. He was indeed a little tempted. In fact, as Hydra developed to the modern era, Pierce already had a sense of powerlessness. He had to help clean up the mess, and he made a plan for fear of being discovered by the so-called decent people. It can be said that he didn't have much idea about the organization's plans. Basically, the mysterious Snake doctor proposed and implemented the future plan. The fundamental of implementation is indeed, as Jonathan said, at most it is to rule the world. But these are completely empty under the arrival of alien threats. If this is true, then the unification of the factions must be on the agenda. Pierce stared at Jonathan closely. His son has changed a lot in the past 3 years. If he hadn't tried it many times, he would have really thought that he was replaced by someone else. He originally only placed high hopes on Jonathan's eldest and second brothers, wanting them to inherit the organization's mission, but he didn't expect. The most promising ones are probably not the two of them, but Jonathan, his most beloved youngest son, in front of him. Now, Jonathan can put forward his own opinions, which means that he has his own plans. As a father, he is relatively relieved. In this case, let's give it a try. Jonathan, come with me to the experimental department. Although Pierce was tempted, he was cautious and suspicious and decided to verify the authenticity of the matter first, and then gather the core members to make a decision. At this moment, in Hell's Kitchen in New York, in a magnificent penthouse, the air was filled with a suffocating tension. Wilson Fisk, the more widely known underworld emperor, Kingpin, stood in front of the French window like a towering statue. His burly body cast a long shadow in the moonlight, as if to swallow the whole room. Behind him, 2 embarrassed figures were kneeling. Kingpin sighed, turned slowly, and squinted his eyes, which were disproportionately small due to the squeezing of facial muscles, into a slit, and his eagle-like eyes pierced the 2 like a sword. I remember, this seems to be just a simple mission to capture someone alive. Bullseye lowered his head, not daring to look directly into Kingpin's eyes. His proud, never-missing hand was now hanging limply by his side, with bruises on his wrist clearly visible. Boss, we encountered an accident. Accident? Kingpin sneered, mocking. What kind of accident could make my 2 most capable men look so miserable? Erica took a step forward. We underestimated Jonathan, he is not an ordinary person. Hearing this, Kingpin's expression instantly darkened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop suddenly, and even the air became heavy. He slowly walked towards the 2 people, and every step seemed to be stepping on their hearts. Tell me, Kingpin's voice was dangerous and low. You 2, my best killers, were defeated by an unknown little character. Bullseye and Erica took a step back at the same time. They knew Kingpin's temper too well. Whenever the mission was not completed, Kingpin would personally take action, and would train both men and women severely. Serving the Emperor is like serving a tiger. The 2 could only tremble in fear and dare not breathe. But surprisingly, King, who was holding the cane, did not take action. He just glanced at the 2 coldly and then said, So, the target of the commissioned mission is indeed strange. However, you can come back alive, so I guess the other party must have something to tell me, right? Kingpin has been in this position for so many years, so he naturally knows Jonathan's intentions. He is very curious about what this, Jonathan, will leave for him. He said, Don't play hide and seek. If you want to find him, go find him in person. Hearing this, Kingpin's eyebrows suddenly raised, and a gleam of displeasure flashed in his eyes. Hee, it's been a long time since anyone dared to talk to me like this. In that case, I'll satisfy him. Bullseye, go and hold your hands together. I have something important to discuss with Madame Gao. Chapter 71. Kingpin's anger was like a cluster of sparks that soon spread to the entire underground world. Kingpin was a man with both muscle and wisdom. He was not conceited and thought that he could easily control Jonathan with just a strong body. So, in order to ensure that his counterattack was foolproof, he also found the hand, which was also active in Hell's Kitchen, and asked Mrs. Gao, who had cooperated with him, to send a group of ninjas to help him. At the same time, he also asked Erica to find the hidden purple man Zebdia Kilgrave, who was also active in Hell's Kitchen and had fought with Daredevil many times. It is said that his body was stimulated to mutate by some chemical hormones. Once these hormones are absorbed by the skin, they can make people controlled by the Purple Man's words. However, these effects are only effective when he is present and uses his own tone and voice. At the same time, on the other side of New York, Jonathan's cheap father Alexander Pierce sat in the office of the secret base, listening to Rumlow's report from the intelligence department with a gloomy face. You mean, Pierce's voice was as cold as ice. Has Kingpin started to act? Rumlow flipped through the documents in his hand and confirmed it again. Yes, Director. According to the secret information from our undercover agents under Kingpin, Kingpin has now contacted the Purple Man Kilgrave and commissioned the Hand. Are there any movements from Viper and Strucker? They were invited by Kingpin to the apartment for a secret talk this morning, and they are basically inseparable from this matter. Hee, I would cover it up before, but this time, I'm not going to pretend. Pierce's gold-rimmed glasses flashed a trace of ruthlessness, and then he stood up, walked to the window with his hands behind his back, and looked at the Hydra agent who had been tidied by Sidwell outside the window, and pondered. How is Jonathan's data result compared? Director, the report is out. What he said is true, it can absorb various types of energy and use it for its own benefit. This form of action is very similar to vibranium. What about the prophetic effect? Yesterday I specifically asked Dr. Cobra about the progress. He said that the brainwashing program has now entered the clinical trial stage. If nothing goes wrong, we will be able to see the finished product of the Winter Project next year. Very good. Get ready to go. In an abandoned factory in the suburbs of New York City. Since Jonathan sensed the crowd behind him, he deliberately led the way, went through the alley, and came here. But Jonathan was not facing a group of brain-dead people with reduced intelligence. The moment Jonathan entered the factory, the people behind the scenes immediately noticed something was wrong, and quickly asked the people to stop and choose to let the team of Hydra agents break into the factory to take the lead. Anyway, the Hydra agents were extremely loyal and numerous, so the death of a few people was of no concern to Viper and Strucker. Bang! Suddenly, the factory gate was pushed open. The fully armed Hydra team filed in, their eyes were very calm, their hands were neat and tidy, and all their weapons were loaded in 2 seconds. Following Viper's order in the microphone, the agents did not hesitate and pulled the trigger one after another. Some of them shot at Jonathan, while others fired blindly at the surroundings of the factory to determine if there were any enemy ambushes. Flames burst out from the muzzle of the submachine gun, and hundreds of yellow bullets rained down on Jonathan without cost. But Jonathan still stood there, without any movement. When the rain of bullets was about to approach his body, it was like being blocked by a cotton ball, covering his body surface, and all the kinetic energy attached to the bullets was absorbed by this invisible ball layer. At the same time, Jonathan's figure began to tremble unconsciously, and every angle he swung turned into an infinitely superimposed afterimage, overlapping and separating again. After losing kinetic energy, those bullets fell to the ground like flowing water, making a crisp sound of collision. However, seeing Jonathan's strange state, the Hydra agents did not stop the fire and continued to shoot. If you get close to the microphone of one of the agents, you can hear Strucker's special instructions. Yes, continue. That's it. When his energy is about to reach saturation, the agents of the Hand and members of other teams will come together. Jonathan here can naturally realize their purpose, which is nothing more than to make himself full and then have another round of real attack. But this move was already used in the Black Robe world. Jonathan had been used by Zubao once, and he would naturally remember it forever. However, if he created an illusion and tricked the outsiders in first, it would be easier to kill them. Thinking of this, Jonathan pretended to be hit by some of the kinetic energy of the bullet, and his footsteps, uncontrollably, retreated backwards. Seeing this, Stark, who had been receiving the real-time broadcast of the Hydra agent, was overjoyed, and directly gave an order to rush into the factory with other members of the Hydra team in the Hand. However, the always steady Kingpin did not go in with him, but stood outside with the Scepter, Purple Man, Bullseye and Erica. With his excellent eyesight, he could keep a close eye on the battle situation in real time, and if there was any problem, he would take action at any time. At that time, with an order from Mrs. Gao, the ninjas of the Hand suddenly appeared in the air like shadows hidden in the night, and the black fog around them dissipated. They were dressed in black ninja uniforms, holding sharp kunai, and their eyes flashed with cold murderous intent. The leading ninja waved his hand, and dozens of elite ninjas rushed towards Jonathan like arrows from a bow, attacking multiple fatal parts at extremely fast speeds and tricky angles. At the same time, the Hydra agents stopped their firepower to cooperate with the ninjas when they attacked. For a moment, Jonathan had fallen into the siege of the ninjas, surrounded by enemies, and seemed to have no escape. But Jonathan was waiting for this moment. Little life, I didn't have the chance to touch you in my last life. In this life, I can't wait. The clear yellow light flowed from Jonathan's eyes, and in an instant, the outside of his body burst into an extreme light, which exploded in a cross shape after being compressed violently. All the ninjas who were close to the daily life around were very lucky to experience the joy of their ancestors tasting the little boy. Just a flash of light in front of their eyes, the warm heat covered their bodies, giving them a full focus spa. At the same time, the light also humanely blinded them for a short time, and while enjoying it, the body was blown apart, all the pain left in the world was wiped out, and finally sent to the feet of Amaterasu. Oh, no, the daily life of the hand seems to believe in beasts. Bang! The limbs and arms that were cooked to the point of smoking were scattered all over the ground, and the smell of meat lingered, but Mrs. Gao, who was in the lead, seemed to be dissatisfied with Jonathan's hospitality and swung her thin fist to hit Jonathan in the face. Around the fist, Jonathan felt an inexplicable and majestic force. If nothing unexpected happened, it should be the Qigong from Kunlun. Jonathan did not dodge Mrs. Gao's fist, but showed the same smile as Zubao and raised his hand to meet the blow. In the air, the energy fluctuations formed by the collision of the two hands were not small. Although they were all absorbed by Jonathan, he could clearly sense that the force contained in this blow was not small. Jonathan did not expect that Mrs. Gao was short and thin, but her strength was really strong. With the power of Qigong, she could even compete with Queen Maeve in the black robe. It seems that Kunlun Qigong is really good. Not bad, old woman. Jonathan chuckled. Mrs. Gao did not say anything, but narrowed her eyes and flashed. The next moment, she appeared behind Jonathan. The old palm grabbed his neck like an eagle's claw, but found that it was just like hitting a ball of cotton, and all the strength was removed. At this time, the remaining ninjas around did not deliberately give up the venue for the two to fight alone. Fighting alone and teaching the enemy martial ethics is a brain-dead scene that only appears in movies. Here, they said that they only have one target, that is Jonathan. Waiting for the opportunity, one ninja after another made hand seals and turned into a ball of black mist. The next second, they suddenly appeared in front of Jonathan, and dozens of poisonous kunai shot out like flowers scattered by the sky. Shua shua. Jonathan dodged and his body easily took these kunai, and then re-empowered the energy on the kunai and returned it along the original path. Part of it was also thrown in the direction of Mrs. Gao. Seeing this, Mrs. Gao jumped back lightly, and after landing, she put her hands together in a grasping shape, and then squeezed hard and tore it back. The next second, a large invisible white gas ball formed from her hands. Then, as the distance between Madame Gao's hands increased, the chi was directly flattened into a large net of the same height, which stopped all the kunai in midair and spun in scattered patterns. Then, Madame Gao removed the chi net, and all the kunai were thrown to the ground. After adjusting her state, she rushed towards Jonathan again. This time, the old lady didn't know what kind of drugs she had taken, and a scarlet and seductive red light burst out of her eyes. Her strength became extremely great, and her attack speed was also extremely fast. Jonathan crossed his arms in front of his chest, and steadily caught Madame Gao's volley kick and then threw it aside. After landing, Madame Gao snorted coldly and continued to speed up the rhythm of the attack. Her figure flickered around Jonathan, sometimes appearing on the left, sometimes on the right, and every time she appeared, she would launch a fierce attack. Palm, fist, elbow, knee, every move was fierce, and there was no sign of the skills of an old lady. But Jonathan seemed calm and unhurried. No matter how powerful Madame Gao was, his reaction speed was far better than Madame Gao, and he could accurately predict the opponent's attack position every time. Not only that, as she continued to fight with Jonathan, Madame Gao's breath was constantly weakening. Finally, seeing that her attack was useless, Madame Gao took a few steps back, her chest heaving violently. They are right. You are indeed strange. You can absorb essence. You really look like Dragon Girl. Dragon Girl. Jonathan tilted his head. Which high-level master of Kunlun is Dragon Girl? How come he has never heard of her? Hee. Want to know? Take my move first. Madame Gao spit on the ground, then formed a seal with both hands, and poked her heart with the sword finger. The next second, Jonathan's extremely sensitive senses to energy instantly captured a wave that suddenly appeared and then descended on Madame Gao. This energy carries an extremely foul smell, and is naturally sticky with information. Except for Madame Gao, anyone will instinctively reject this energy. This includes Jonathan. If nothing unexpected happens, this may be the original demon, beast, that the hand has always worshipped. As the filth invaded, Madame Chow's whites of the eyes were directly covered with black, her thin body shook, and suddenly she crushed the concrete floor on the ground, and the whole person flew towards Jonathan so lightly and then gently touched it with her skinny fingers. Instantly, Jonathan seemed to be locked by a ferocious beast from ancient times. The whole person's figure became slow at the moment of contact, as if he was trapped in a swamp and his movements were forced to slow down. Then, the energy that could not be absorbed rushed straight towards Jonathan. The black and fishy turbidity began to erode Jonathan's skin. They seemed to have a regular power, and just a slight touch would devour his extremely strong skin layer. But Jonathan's ultimate self-healing ability is still working, drawing on the energy stored in his body to growth, offsetting a lot of black energy. At this point, Jonathan did not dare to take it lightly, and directly added all the energy contained in his body to his upper limbs. The bronze muscles suddenly rose, the hair was dyed with broken gold, the pupils shrank sharply, and then burst out. Shua. The violent beam of light directly dispersed the surrounding black energy layer by layer, and melted Mrs. Gao, who was wrapped in the innermost layer by layer. Then, Jonathan did not hesitate, grabbed Mrs. Gao's neck with his right hand, and smashed her to the ground. Pa! The concrete floor cracked, and Jonathan picked up Mrs. Gao's body again, who was not sure whether to live or die, and threw it. Pa! Mrs. Gao flew out like a kite with a broken string, and hit the wall of the factory heavily. The blood and qi flowed backwards, and the qigong in her body collapsed instantly. After falling to the ground, she spit out a mouthful of black blood. As expected, the son of the dragon girl. Mrs. Gao fainted after saying this. Jonathan didn't hear it clearly at all. He only heard the words of the dragon girl's son. Forget it, I'll ask my cheap dad later. Now, there are still a bunch of little karami to deal with. Jonathan didn't think too much. He turned into a golden light and rushed out at an extreme speed, and then dealt with the little day ninjas one by one with a crushing state. Whether it was tearing it apart with hands or blasting it at a fixed point, wherever Jonathan went, none of the fresh bodies of these ninjas were intact. At this time, the cunning Baron Stark saw that the momentum was not right, and rushed out of the factory and ran outside, leaving the Viper who had not yet reacted behind him. At this time, Jonathan had already used thermal vision to make free artificial skewers for those Hydra agents. Some of them who were not dead were still alive and fierce, indicating that they were very fresh. Baron Stark's escape was actually useless, because before he came, he asked his father to ambush outside the factory, and wait until the people inside were almost eliminated before catching the turtle in the jar. Viper ran slowly and was naturally caught by Jonathan and lifted in the air. And Viper, my father has always taken care of you. This matter is very decisive. Don't kill me. I am willing to follow you and be loyal to Pierce. Look, my figure, do you like it? I can. As Viper said, she shook her waist and her whole body shook uncontrollably like a sieve. Before Jonathan responded, Viper was frightened and collapsed. Sorry, ugly rejection. As he said, Jonathan didn't have any regrets. He grabbed Viper's hair and burned her delicate face, which had been carefully maintained for nearly 60 years with special serum, into a pile of charcoal. You know what? Thermal vision is really useful. Jonathan stepped over Viper's body and walked slowly towards the factory gate. If his calculations were correct, the cheap dad should have arrived with his men by now, right? When Jonathan walked out of the gate of the abandoned factory, he was still hot from the battle, and his clothes were stained with blood, but his skin was still as smooth as new without any pollution. He looked around and saw that a large group of agents led by his cheap father Pierce had surrounded the entire area. Baron Stark was stuck in the middle, but his face was not much panic. Stark, you've gone too far this time, Pierce said gloomily. You usually bring Viper to find trouble everywhere, I can still tolerate it. But you, obviously have forgotten the previous rules and touched the bottom line of factional disputes. Strucker sneered. Pierce, don't pretend to be so righteous, don't think you are a good bird who abides by the rules. You said you don't care about factional disputes, what are you doing now? And, without the two of us, Hydra will still be like the period after World War II, like a rat's nest in the ground, unable to come to the stage. Hearing this, Pierce's expression became more gloomy. He stared at Baron Strucker, staring at him until his body was hairy. You too, how dare you say that? Who wiped your ass for your reckless behavior? You have spies and spies ambushed here, do you think I don't know? It's okay to tolerate it again and again. This time, you actually want to ride on my head. Pierce pushed his gold-rimmed glasses, and a sharp light flashed across the lenses. Perhaps, it would be better without you. But, before you die, I will dig out all the hidden players you have arranged one by one. Then, Pierce glanced at the fully armed Hydra soldiers behind him, and 2 Hydra soldiers stepped forward, ready to take down Stark. But at this moment, a thin figure with purple skin walked out from behind Stark, and then waved his hands in the air, and the 2 soldiers stood there stupidly as if they were drugged. It was the purple man brought by Kingpin. Everyone, I don't mean to interfere in your factional disputes, but we have reached a deal before, accepting money from others, helping others to eliminate disasters, right? Give me face. After the purple man made a move, Kingpin supported his cane and walked forward step by step, his eyes looking arrogant, and his huge body with muscles full of white suits just stood there, and a full sense of oppression came. As soon as Kingpin finished speaking, the purple man waved his hand and released a powerful hormone force field, instantly controlling the surrounding Hydra soldiers. As the hormone entered the body, these soldiers' eyes immediately flashed with strange purple light, and then they raised their weapons uncontrollably and aimed at Pierce and his group. At this time, the other soldiers who were not controlled in the rear range immediately raised their guns and aimed at Kingpin and his group. Seeing this, Pierce said in a deep voice, Kingpin, this is our internal affairs, you don't need to intervene. Do you want to go to war with our entire shield? Hearing Kingpin chuckled with a hint of disdain. Don't say that, Pierce. You made such a big fuss in my territory, do you think I can stay out of it? Besides, your shield often makes some small fuss in my territory. I haven't settled this account with you yet. King Bing, I can give you all my industries. You help me kill them, don't worry about the consequences. With my faction, anyone can be the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. When Stark saw the situation reversed, his expression became ferocious. He suddenly remembered that Pierce still had S.H.I.E.L.D. as a support. If Pierce fell, he could take over all of S.H.I.E.L.D. At that time, his faction would be the only one in power, and even with one order, the entire Hydra would operate for him alone. Thinking of this, Stark gave the bargaining chips without hesitation and waited for King Bing's response. King Bing couldn't choose not to swallow up his own large industry. And just as he thought, King Bing hesitated for a while and nodded. Purple Man, can you do it? Don't worry, as long as your 2 men are willing to help me, I can control most of the soldiers in a short time. As he said, Purple Man activated the hormone force field again, and his whole body emitted a substantial purple mist, floating towards Pierce and the Hydra soldiers behind him, while Erica and Bullseye also attacked at the same time, sprinting up. At this time, Jonathan, who was walking out of the factory, happened to witness this scene, and thought to himself that it was not good, so he turned into a golden streak and ran towards the direction of his cheap father. At this time, Kingpin, who was blocking Jonathan in front, also saw Jonathan running back. Sen narrowed his eyes, raised his cane, and pressed a mechanism. The next second, a lot of smoke floated out of the joints of the cane. This smoke was completely different from the effect released by the Purple Man. It spread into the air faster, with lower visibility, and it also had the weakness effect specially prepared by Kingpin. Before, Daredevil often brought his team to cause trouble, and Kingpin used these little tricks to trick them, making them weak and powerless, and then easily defeated them. Not only that, these smokes also have the effect of concealing the body, and can attack the enemy unexpectedly. But what Kingpin is facing at this time is not Daredevil, but Jonathan, who beat Zubao to tears in the Black Robe world. Hoo-hoo. Jonathan ignored the smoke. With his physical fitness and the concept of lysosomes in his body, he would be fine even if he lived in the sarin gas mask for 100 years. What's more, Jonathan can use his senses to sense the free energy around him, and humans are the most obvious energy carriers, and Kingpin's huge body is just like a large mobile energy station. So, there is no need for any exploration. Jonathan flashed straight in front of Kingpin, and raised his hand to throw an uppercut under the extremely horrified eyes of this muscle tyrant. However, Kingpin has gone through years of training and is also a fighting master. At the moment when Jonathan's punch came, he quickly crossed his hands and dissipated the power of Jonathan's punch on his two strong arms. After taking the blow, Kingpin grabbed with one hand and aimed at Jonathan's neck for a surprise attack. But Jonathan did not indulge Kingpin. He didn't even need to open the energy absorption to deal with Kingpin. Keeping the energy in his body at this stage, Jonathan hit Kingpin's bald head with a headbutt, which made him see stars. Then, Jonathan grabbed Jin Bing's extremely thick neck with one hand, lifted him up easily, and then pushed him down with force, smashing his neck and whole body to the ground. Kingpin's huge body hit the ground heavily, making a dull sound. Although he was hit hard, Kingpin, who had a strong physique and thick skin, did not suffer any damage. He saw his muscles in both hands burst out, pinched Jonathan's hand, and quickly jumped up from the ground with a carp jump, clenched his fists, and took a fighting posture. Then, Kingpin rushed forward to grab the advantage and threw a heavy punch. Jonathan easily avoided it. At the same time, he turned his wrist and pinched Kingpin's joints, using his momentum to throw him away. Kingpin was huge, but very flexible. He just adjusted his posture in the air and landed steadily. He twisted his neck and found that Jonathan was very strong. It was difficult to gain an advantage without external force, so Kingpin squinted his eyes, took out a pair of special brass knuckles from his suit pocket, and put them on quickly. This time, Jin Bing became more cautious. He slowly approached Jonathan, looking for the right time to attack, and then suddenly rushed forward with a lightning-fast right hand. Jonathan leaned back to avoid the blow, but Jin Bing's left hand followed closely, and the brass knuckles brushed Jonathan's cheek, leaving several blood marks. However, what shocked Jin Bing was that there was no emotional fluctuation on Jonathan's face, and the wound on his face healed at a speed visible to the naked eye in an instant. Looking at Jonathan's smooth and new skin, Master Jin, who had been busy for most of the day, suddenly felt a little tired. "Did you enjoy the fight? I'm in a hurry, it should be my turn this time." As soon as the voice fell, Jonathan appeared in front of Jin Bing with a flash of golden light, and hit him in the abdomen with a heavy punch. Even with Jin Bing's physique intolerance, he was bent over by the force of this punch and spit out a mouthful of black blood. Jonathan didn't stop, and took advantage of the situation to attack Kingpin's face and body. He punched Kingpin left and right, and each punch accumulated the remaining energy. The additional force directly knocked Kingpin's huge body to the brink of collapse, and he beat Kingpin like a chicken without any ability to fight back, like a huge muscle baby. During this period, Kingpin tried to fight back, but his movements were as slow as a turtle in Jonathan's eyes. He just dodged slightly, dodged a punch and hit Kingpin back, and never suffered a loss. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of punches hitting flesh was endless. Soon Kingpin's face was blue and purple, his two whites of the eyes turned up unnaturally, half of his face was unconscious because of Jonathan's beating, and one ear was bleeding black blood, and the whole sound was filled with tinnitus. Finally, Kingpin could no longer hold on, his knees softened and he fell to the ground, but Jonathan did not stop there. He grabbed Kingpin's suit collar, lifted him up, and threw him hard to the ground. After a perfect set of radio gymnastics, Jonathan looked at Kingpin, who was unconscious on the ground, shrugged slightly, and then ran to the position of his cheap father at a very fast speed. Jonathan did not kill Kingpin, because Kingpin, this muscle tyrant, was capable of doing things and kept his promises. He could still do something for himself if he was kept. Moreover, if he really killed him, his underworld empire would immediately riot. When Kingpin was around, they were all good kids, but when he was not around, they were all devils. Jonathan would have to deal with them one by one. It was too troublesome. Everyone has their own expertise, so let's leave it to professionals. At this time, the Purple Man just expanded the range of hormones. Within a radius of 5 meters, the Hydra soldiers were controlled by him. Following his command as the main body, they began to attack the Hydra soldiers who were still awake. On the other side, seeing that the strange purple mist with tracking properties was about to float to his side, Pierce quickly covered his nose to avoid it, but he found that no matter where he ran, the mist would always follow him. Die-hard Rumlow and Sidwell had already joined the firepower confrontation team and could not spare themselves to protect him for the time being. At this critical moment, a familiar voice suddenly came from Pierce's side. "Dad, be careful." Pierce quickly turned his head and found that Jonathan was rushing towards him at a very fast speed, along with the wind group around his body that was accelerating. Pierce only felt a pain in his old waist, and the wind group raged on his face, and his neatly combed hair flew randomly before departure. The next second when he opened his eyes, he was surprised to find that he had been taken out of the battlefield. Jonathan, with blonde hair, was standing beside him without changing his expression. Seeing the urgent situation, Pierce ignored Jonathan's hair color change and said solemnly, "Jonathan, this purple man is very dangerous. His purple mist has a strong mental control ability. Once touched, there is no way to resist." Quote, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll deal with him." Jonathan curled his lips, and a trace of disdain flashed in his eyes. In terms of mental control, this purple man is not even a hair of Kate. "Dad, those who are controlled." Pierce naturally knew what Jonathan meant and nodded slightly. "Don't worry, just move." "Okay." Quote, the next second, Jonathan turned into a beam of light, knocking away all the Hydra agents who were blocking the way, and rushed to the purple man in almost a flash. The purple man, who was immersed in controlling the overall situation, obviously did not expect Jonathan's speed to be so fast. He appeared in front of him in almost the blink of an eye. In a hurry, he condensed a large ball of purple liquid hormone in his right hand, and wanted to control him. However, Jonathan was prepared, and the "hold your breath and concentrate" effect was activated, and the purple man's mental hormones could not enter his body at all, let alone work on him. Then Jonathan sneered and punched the purple man in the abdomen. Bang! The purple man was struck by lightning, and his whole body bent like a male dog, spitting blood and flying backwards more than 10 meters away and fell heavily on the ground. Before he could get up, Jonathan flashed to his side again, grabbed his neck and lifted him up. How could you not be controlled by me?" The purple man covered his chest with countless broken ribs, spitting blood, and said with difficulty, "Maybe my mind is clearer." As he said that, Jonathan's eyes flashed with golden light, and 2 beams of light shot out, leaving 2 big holes in the purple man's eye sockets. Jonathan also considerately did some free microplastic surgery on his mouth. It barely formed an ugly, smiley face. And without the control of the main body of the purple man, those Hydra soldiers who were controlled suddenly woke up from their dreams, and their eyes became clear again. Rumlow took the opportunity to lead the team to pursue the victory and quickly suppress the people brought by Stark. Seeing that the battle was almost over, Pierce walked back to the center and came to Baron Stark, who was surrounded by all the members. "Now, Stark, do you have anything else to say?" Pierce adjusted his hairstyle, raised his belt, and asked, "You traitor, without me, Hydra is nothing." Quote, Strucker had no awareness of being a prisoner and was still shouting shamelessly. Pierce thought this guy had something else to say. It was really boring to be stubborn even when he was about to die. "Strucker will be taken away by our shield for interrogation, and the others will be dealt with by Kingpin himself." Now the real Hydra has been eliminated by Pierce in the name of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is not only a signal of a perfect ending to the outside world, but also a special eye drop for the suspicious Nick Fury. The scene of this incident is a bit big. If you want to hide it from him, you really have to work hard to think of a perfect reason, which is really a headache. I didn't dare to pull this dead black to the top at the beginning. Instead, it was Kingpin. Pierce looked at his son Jonathan unexpectedly. Keeping Kingpin was indeed a good plan. Now he is so smart. And after this battle, he really saw how terrifying Jonathan's fighting power was. It seems that the research on the Cosmic Cube needs to be deepened. One step. If Jonathan's mutation cannot be replicated, then we need to find other channels for research. If not, he also has a real combat power facade. Well, just like Captain America and Red Skull. In 2 years, when I am older, Jonathan will probably be able to take charge of the situation. I don't know what Hydra will become. As for whether to let Jonathan inherit his mantle, Pierce said he needs to wait and see, and not rush to make a conclusion. Just as Pierce was constantly thinking about the future, Jonathan suddenly appeared beside him and was surprised when he spoke. "Dad, who is that?" "Dragon girl." Hearing the keyword, dragon girl, Pierce's originally relaxed expression instantly became tense. "Who told you this word?" "Well, the old woman on the stretcher over there said it." Pierce turned his head and looked at Jonathan's finger, and saw Mrs. Gao, whose whole body was twisted and unrecognizable, and suddenly a trace of haze flashed in his eyes. "The hand. I didn't expect to miss you." The secret of the year, the traders of Kunlun also knew it. Retracting his gaze, Pierce pondered for a while. "Jonathan, there are some secrets I didn't tell you when you were a child. Now that you've grown up, it's time to tell you. But not here, let's go back to the base." Jonathan shrugged, and began to mutter in his heart. He had never seen his cheap father show such a face. The name style of this, Dragon Girl, is not like the old American. It sounds like it comes from Kunlun. But when did Kunlun have so many roles? It can also be linked to New York, and make the old man, the director of Hydra, look embarrassed. This news, I guess it will be very explosive. Could it be the old lover? After returning to the Hydra base, Pierce arranged for his men to first detain Strucker, and then let Rumlow contact Dr. Cobra to import the brainwashing program into Strucker's memory. Since Pierce was dispatched to eliminate Hydra in the name of S.H.I.E.L.D., he came up with a plan to hide it from Nick Fury. As a captive, Strucker would definitely be handed over to the interrogation table and interrogated by the department in charge of Nick Fury. With Strucker's outspoken mouth, he would definitely reveal all the things about Hydra. Therefore, Pierce used the brainwashing program developed by Dr. Cobra to first get all the secrets of Strucker's faction, and then brainwashed him again, and revealed the secrets of Hydra in his interrogation with preset content. In this way, the organization's secrets can be prevented from being leaked, and Nick Fury's desire to pry into some secrets can be satisfied, so there won't be so many problems to find later. After doing all this, Pierce took Jonathan to his private office and locked the door. "Sit down." Pierce pointed to the sofa and took out a bottle of whiskey from the wine cabinet. "Want a drink?" Jonathan shook his head. "No, Dad, stop keeping me in suspense. Tell me who the dragon girl is." Pierce poured himself a glass of wine, raised his head and drank it all in one gulp, then slowly said, "The dragon girl is actually your mother." "What?" Jonathan was confused. He had been thinking about the identity of the dragon girl before coming here. How could he eat melons and eat his own body? Then he blurted out without thinking, "What about you? Aren't you my biological father? You stinky boy, you're itching for trouble, right? Don't think I won't beat you just because you've become stronger. I'm still your father." Hearing Jonathan's words, Pierce couldn't sit still, and pulled out his belt to give Jonathan a live singles fight. Hey, calm down, Dad, you haven't finished yet." Jonathan quickly poured Pierce a glass of wine, held it up with both hands and put it in front of his mouth. "You fool, your mother grew up in Kunlun. Speaking of Kunlun, I have to tell you about it. In Chinese legend, every 15 years or so, a country called Kunlun City appears in the world. All the people in this country practice martial arts, and martial arts are taught from within Kunlun. The leader of Kunlun is called Jade Emperor. His lifespan is unknown, and his strength is unfathomable. He also leads Kunlun with the 4 elders, Thunder God, Mangpo, Black Dragon, and Guanyin. And among them, the elder named Guanyin was discovered by the Jade Emperor when he traveled to Uyghur and was made a disciple. It is said that his ability is to have a miniature star body in his head. Quote, "Guanyin's star body generates high heat like the sun, can sense the fluctuations of energy and emotions, detect the signs of death of nearby life, understand and use unfamiliar languages, heal others, and even survive in a vacuum. And your mother, Long Nv, is the daughter of this Guanyin. She has the natural ability to bewitch people and control their minds, which is better than the control of the purple man. I don't know how many times stronger she is. It seems, isn't my mother the female version of Professor X? And because of this ability, your mother's ability has been extremely unstable since she was a child. In order to ensure the safety of Kunlun, the Jade Emperor expelled your mother from Kunlun. Then, Did she meet you, Dad? When I met her, she was abducted to the United States by human traffickers because she grew up in Kunlun and didn't care about the world. At that time, I was carrying out a robbery mission and needed to save a child in the human traffickers' den, but when I broke into the door, I saw the human traffickers twisted and constantly self-harming all over the ground. Your mother was standing in the middle, and she fainted on the ground after a violent red light burst out of her body. Quote. So, I took her back to Hydra. Pierce said this and drank another sip of wine. Since then, she began to contact the outside world through Hydra, and soon integrated into the current society. We fell in love soon after. Quote. But, the Jade Emperor eventually found out about your connection with the outside world, and he sent people to hunt down your mother. In the end, it was Guanyin who came forward and saved your mother, but your mother was seriously injured when she gave birth to you, and she passed away after leaving you behind. So, Jonathan, this is why your hair and eyes are both black. But, Guanyin's deal with the Jade Emperor is only for 25 years. After 25 years, if you show up again, the Jade Emperor will still choose to take action. Jonathan's expression froze when he heard this. To be honest, he really didn't expect that such a bloody thing would happen to him. So, he still has a grudge against the Jade Emperor of Kunlun. Although he inherited the memory of his predecessor, it doesn't mean that he has to bear the grudge. There is no way to escape from this situation now. After all, he is the product of Kunlun's contamination with the outside world. What about my eldest brother and second brother? Quote. In order not to attract the attention of the Jade Emperor, I adopted them on purpose to confuse the Jade Emperor, but they don't know it. That's why I didn't let you inherit Hydra's affairs. I just wanted to send you to a safe place in 25 years and live in peace. Oh, Jonathan suddenly realized why his eldest brother and second brother were both blonde and blue-eyed, with typical American looks, while he had black hair and black eyes. So, Jonathan, the potential of your ability is not small. If one day you can really grow to the strength of Ms. Marvel, I believe the Jade Emperor will not be a threat at all. Quote. Jonathan looked constipated when he heard Pierce's words. He not only had to face the threat of the New York War, the threat of Thanos, Kong the Conqueror and even the threat from the multiverse, but he couldn't rest easy before that, and he had to deal with the extremely possessive Jade Emperor. It seems, I have to speed up my process of becoming stronger. You know, this Jade Emperor in Marvel is not a simple guy, his status is almost the same as Odin of Asgard and Zeus of Olympus. A true father-level combat power. After Jonathan left the secret base, Pierce specially tested the rhetoric that Baron Strucker had prepared in his mind again. Then, he sent it to the intelligence department in charge of Nick Fury. As for Jonathan's information, the previous battle was so noisy that it was absolutely impossible to hide it from Nick Fury, a black-boiled egg. If you just throw the traces at the scene to the laboratory, you will find something wrong. Pierce simply packaged Jonathan's changes again, modified some of the content, and selectively told Nick Fury. Nick Fury, who got the news, was of course extremely shocked. After all, it was almost a replica of the Captain Marvel incident that year, and the person who happened was someone he knew well. The key is, I didn't know it until now. No matter what the ability is, the most important thing is controllability. So, Pierce, are you sure that Jonathan's superpowers come from the cosmic cube? That time, you deliberately hid from me. Nick Fury spoke slowly, with scrutiny in his one eye. This was too outrageous, right under his nose. The only possibility was that the truth was concealed. Where would he put his face as the spy chief? Pierce smiled slightly, but the smile did not reach his eyes. I know what you are hinting at, Nick. Jonathan's change is absolutely confidential. In order to block the news as soon as possible, I can only do this. Oh, Pierce, I didn't hint at anything. Fury shrugged. It's just that this time is too coincidental, don't you think? When we transferred the cosmic cube to Dr. Banner, an unknown enemy happened to fight for it, and Jonathan happened to be at the scene for some reason. Now Jonathan has suddenly gained such ability. It's not normal no matter how you look at it, but it seems to be deliberately planned. Pierce leaned back in his chair, a little speechless. In fact, Jonathan's change was indeed an accident, but there are always people who are suspicious and like to make up stories, and always talk about conspiracy theories. Forget it. It's okay to have doubts, Just put the blame on Baron Strucker and other, Hydra, and everything can be cleared up. I don't know if it's a coincidence. Baron Strucker has been sent to your intelligence department, and I believe you have more than 100 ways to pry open his mouth. Hearing this, Fury's one eye instantly became sharp. Hydra from World War II has reappeared. I don't know how many remnants there are, and the workload of intelligence work during this period will increase again. And I want to meet Jonathan in person and do some tests on him. Fury had seen Jonathan's combat data on the tablet early in the morning, but the data displayed was really exaggerated. Out of caution, he chose to check it out in person. Okay, but Nick, you also watched Jonathan grow up, don't be too harsh on him. Pierce said. Hearing this, Fury narrowed his eyes, and a trace of doubt in his heart was immediately dispelled. In this position, Pierce, I must put national security first. I understand. Pierce stood up. I trust you to do your job. If there is any accident, come to me. I will retire soon. It's better for you to adapt to the burden of S.H.I.E.L.D. in advance. A few days later, Jonathan cooperated with S.H.I.E.L.D. to do another data check. Facts have proved that the data given at the beginning are accurate, and even better. Jonathan's punch force is now close to 3 tons. After absorbing energy to the full value, deliberately letting it go to 60%, he can punch nearly 25 tons. Full value 41 tons. Accumulating power to jump directly from the spot can jump 20 meters. The reaction speed and dynamic capture ability in the state of holding breath and concentrating are 300 times that of normal humans. The running speed can reach 88 miles per hour at the limit. At the same time, when not absorbing energy, Jonathan can withstand Barrett's shooting with his body hardness alone. The bullets only break the skin and get stuck on the surface of the body. It is difficult to penetrate. Normal light machine guns and bullets can't even break the defense. Fury's evaluation of Jonathan's data is that he can easily beat 100 Captain Americas, or even more, but compared to the cosmic saint Captain Marvel, he is still a long way behind. At least Jonathan can't fly, right? This did not affect Fury's mentality of recruiting Jonathan. Without any surprise, he found Jonathan and told him about his plan to build the Avengers Alliance plan. But Jonathan is now stuck in the plan to deal with the Jade Emperor and can't get out of it, not to mention that he doesn't like being governed by others and bound to a team. Especially in the future, there will be some Superhero Registration Act. Being a hero will cause trouble for him. He prefers to stay behind the scenes and wait until the crisis comes before devoting himself to remedy the situation. Just kidding. Being a superhero every day, Jonathan has already given up this addiction when he was in the Black Robe world. Not only does he give speeches every day, but he also has to fight crime everywhere. Wouldn't it be nice to soak in the rooftop of his company, with a bunch of beauties, basking in the sun, and drinking fat otaku happy water? So, Jonathan decisively refused, but left a plan for Nick Fury, that is, to be listed in the Avengers and take action when necessary. Nick Fury had no choice but to agree to Jonathan's conditions. It was not easy to bring a top combat force into the Alliance, not to mention that it was an acquaintance. Unlike Captain Marvel, who is so weak and acts like a saint in the universe, Fury hesitates for a long time every time she wants to press the pager, as if the Earth is not her home planet at all. Nothing but helplessness. After dealing with these chores, Pierce also began to get busy. He sent Hydra agents many times to deal with the remnants of Baron Strucker and Viper. Those who could be recruited were recruited, and those who could not were provided with one-stop service, and the whole family was sent to heaven in an orderly manner. Jonathan also began to focus on the research and development of the company's number 5 compound. He took time to go to the Black Robe world and picked out some elite scientists from the Vought group and brainwashed them to assist the doctor in research. At the same time, he also contacted Kingpin. Since the Underworld Emperor was beaten by Jonathan, he has been submissive and did not refuse Jonathan's request. Instead, he cooperated very well according to the instructions, using his own industry to secretly suppress the competitors of Concept Technology Company, and at the same time helped to expand the promotion of the product. In just half a month, Jonathan's company's influence among the people has been greatly improved. The residents of Hell's Kitchen know about this company, and even Kingpin has installed a positioning device for each of his subordinates. Everyone is busy. Unknowingly, the end of the month has arrived, and the Jericho Strategic Missile Exhibition, held by Stark Industries, has begun to warm up. This also means the plot of Iron Man is about to begin. The sun in Afghanistan scorched the earth mercilessly, and the heat wave distorted the distant scene. At this time, Tony Stark was sitting leisurely in an armored vehicle, wearing sunglasses and a standard high-end suit. He held a glass of champagne and ice in one hand, and listened to music beside the external speakers with his head shaking. Looking at the serious armed soldiers next to him, Tony showed a disgusted expression. There was no way, the atmosphere in the car was too awkward, and it really made him uncomfortable. I have to find something to say. Why is this atmosphere like sending me to a military court? Really, what did I do? Tony couldn't help but complain. It feels like you will stop the car and kill me. Why, are you not allowed to talk? Hey, Brother Gum. Hearing Tony's series of chatterbox output, the soldiers next to him couldn't help it. We can talk, sir. Oh, so you have something against me. Tony looked forward and shook the ice in the glass. In fact, you scared them. The female soldier in the driver's seat said while driving. Oh, God, you are a girl, I really didn't see it. I think I should apologize, but this is the effect, right? I want to treat you as a soldier first. I am in the Air Force. Oh, your bone structure is really good. I can't take my eyes off you until now. Hearing this, everyone present laughed, and Tony picked up the glass and took a sip with interest. That's right. With him, Tony Stark, there will never be a cold place. Sir, I have a question. Seeing the lively atmosphere, the soldier sitting in the co-pilot turned around with a look of eating melons on his face. Have you really dated all 12 cover girls of Maxim Men's magazine last year? Oh, you asked a very good question. When Tony was asked about his professional field, his expression instantly became serious. He took off his sunglasses and answered very seriously. The March girl and I have a schedule conflict, but fortunately the cover of the Christmas issue is twins. Any more questions? Mr. Stark, can I take a photo with you? The soldier next to him became interested and took out his mobile phone from his waist. Of course, but don't post it to my personal space. The soldier raised a, yeah, gesture, approached Tony, and opened the selfie app. Oh, don't use this gangster gesture. You can use it if you have nothing to do, I'm kidding. Peace, I love peace. But if there is peace, these products of mine will never sell so well. Just as they posed for the photo, there was a loud noise in the distance, and Stark turned his head quickly. A huge fireball rose on the horizon, and then the armored vehicle in front of him suddenly exploded. But it was not over yet. The front glass panel of his armored vehicle was suddenly hit by an unknown weapon and shattered. The two soldiers sitting in the front cab were hit by bullets from nowhere and fell to the ground. Seeing this, Tony did not hesitate, and quickly opened the door of the armored vehicle and walked out. But at this time, a rocket launcher hit the area near him directly, and the vibration from the detonation made it difficult for Tony to control his body balance. Seeing this, Tony had to hold the car body to keep stable, holding his head with one hand, and avoiding the sound of bullets colliding and hitting around him. With a whistle behind him, Tony's alarm bells rang wildly, and he quickened his pace. Before the rocket hit the lawn behind him, he jumped and rolled behind a pile of boulders. Seeing that there was a temporary shelter, Tony quickly took out a high-tech mobile phone from his pocket. After a period of micro-zooming and deformation, Tony quickly clicked on the buttons. But at this moment, a missile flew to his side. Tony was a little confused. He looked carefully and saw that it was marked, Stark Industries. What the hell? How could it be my missile? Just as he was trying to run away, the missile exploded without giving Tony time to react. Bang! Tony's brain flashed a blank for a moment, and then he fell to the ground. His vision gradually went black in the constant confusion and tinnitus. 5 hours ago, Tony Stark stood in a barren desert, with a row of neat missile launchers behind him. His white suit was particularly dazzling in the strong sunlight, in sharp contrast to the desolate scene around him. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony spoke, with a hint of the usual self-confidence and arrogance. Today we are going to show you the latest masterpiece developed by Stark Industries, the Jericho Strategic Missile System. At this time, standing in front of Tony was a group of senior military officers and government officials in military uniforms. They were listening attentively to the speech of Tony, the Stark Arms tycoon, with curiosity and scrutiny on their faces. Tony looked around and saw that everyone's face showed expectations and curiosity. He was extremely confident in his products and his mouth corners unconsciously rose slightly. You know, my father Howard has a famous saying, the best guarantee of peace is to have more powerful weapons. Tony continued, his voice echoing in the empty desert. And today, I want to show you the ultimate weapon that can ensure peace. On the sand dunes, Tony turned to face the row of neatly arranged missile launchers and gently pressed the remote control in his hand. In an instant, huge missiles roared into the air and soared into the sky in the amazed eyes of everyone. This is Jericho. Tony's voice was full of complacency. It has unparalleled accuracy and destructiveness. Just one missile can destroy all targets within a few miles. As Tony slowly explained, the missiles suddenly split into dozens of small warheads in the sky, and each warhead accurately hit the preset mountain target in the distance. At the moment of the explosion, Tony suddenly turned around and raised his hands very naturally. The dust accompanying the explosion behind him was flying, and the mountains were easily razed to the ground. This shocking scene was enough to shock everyone present. As expected, the deal was reached, and the general with a red face waved his hand and asked the armored army to escort Tony back. But unfortunately, the accident came faster than anyone else. When Tony woke up with hazy eyes, he found that his body was tied to a chair, surrounded by unknown civilian troops wearing Middle Eastern clothes and holding rifles, speaking to him in an incomprehensible bird language. There was also a video recorder in front of him, and he didn't know what it was recording. Kidnapping. Recording a hostage video. This was what Tony guessed at first. But he soon found out that it wasn't that simple. Before he could open his eyes and see the surroundings clearly, he was covered with a sack again, and then he seemed to be hit by a club again. It was black in front of him again. When he woke up for the second time, he found there seemed to be something extra on his chest. After Tony finally regained consciousness, he looked around with hazy eyes. He found himself lying in a dark and damp cave, surrounded by various discarded electronic devices. Ah, cough cough. The severe chest pain and the strong foreign body sensation in his nose made him groan. He grabbed it casually and slowly pulled out the breathing tube inserted deep into his nasal cavity. Then he struggled with his hands and accidentally knocked over the special water cup on the table next to him. Awake, I advise you not to do this. A strange voice came, and Tony reluctantly turned his head. The strange middle-aged man was shaving against a simple and stained lens. Where is this? What is this? Tony turned around, but was horrified to find a huge battery next to him, with the wires on it connected to his chest. Seeing this, Tony suddenly had an extremely uneasy premonition in his heart. He coughed and pulled off the bandage tied to his body. Then the scene in front of him almost made his heart beat slower. It was a cylindrical mechanical iron product, and the circuit on it was just connected to the battery next to it. What did you do to me? It's not what I did was to save your life. The middle-aged man dressed in academic clothes was holding an iron pot and cooking something, while speaking carelessly. I have tried my best to remove a lot of shrapnel, but there are still a lot left. And they are all heading towards your diaphragm. Want to see it? I left a souvenir, take a look. The man picked up a glass bottle and shook it, and the copper pieces inside collided with each other, making a crisp sound. I've seen a lot of these injuries in my village. I call them dying zombies because it takes about a week for the shrapnel to enter the vital organs. What is this? It's an electromagnet connected to the car battery. It's preventing the shrapnel from entering your heart. Tony's eyes widened when he heard this, and he looked at his chest in disbelief. He, Tony Stark, one of the richest men in the world, is now a prisoner, and his life depends on a simple device. So, Tony, who was in a very bad mood, silently zipped up the clothes he had just taken from his chest, looked around, and found an infrared camera on the wall in front of him. Yes, smile. The man saw Tony found the camera and teased. In fact, we met once, at a technology conference in Bern. I don't remember. Ho ho. Of course, if I was so drunk, I would not be able to stand up straight, let alone give a speech on integrated circuits. Where are we? Bang bang. Just then, there was a knock on the door. Stand up quickly and do it my way. Hold your head with both hands. The man quickly pulled Tony up and told him. Soon, several fully armed terrorists came in shouting bird language, and their eyes fell coldly on Tony and the man. "That's my gun, how did they get it?" Holding his head, Tony was the first to find something wrong. But the man did not respond to him. Instead, the leader of the people came to Tony and spoke bird language, which confused him. Fortunately, the man next to him understood the leader's bird language and translated it. He said, "Welcome Tony Stark, the most famous mass murderer in American history. He is the leader of the 10 Rings, and he feels honored. He wants you to build him a missile, the Jericho strategic missile you showed me." "I refuse." Tony regretted saying this with blood. Next, the angry militants gave him a profound experience of water torture, which left Tony with a shadow and he didn't want to swim again in his life. Soon, compromised, Tony was taken to the weapons base here. He was speechless to find that almost all the weapons here were the ones he had sold. "Here are all the raw materials for building the Jericho missile. He wants you to make a list of materials and start working immediately. Once you are done, he will let you go." Tony finally knew the name of the man, Ethan, who translated on the side. "No, they won't." Tony shook hands with the leader with a fake smile and whispered to Ethan on the side. "Yes," Ethan responded without hesitation. At night, in the cave where he used to live, Tony was wearing a coat, staring at the fire in front of him. The weapons he made were supposed to be used by the military to protect innocent people, but he didn't expect that they would fall into the hands of these terrorists, which made him feel sick. From this evening till now, there have been obvious vibrations and collisions from the outside world. Now Tony can only pin his hopes on his good friend Rhodes, who is an officer. "Don't wait, this cave system is too complicated, your friend may not be able to find this place." Ethan looked at Tony, who was doing nothing, and naturally guessed what he was thinking. "Did you see everything today? That's your legacy, Stark. Your life's hard work fell into the hands of those murderers. Do you want to die like this? Is this the last resistance of the great Tony Stark?" Tony leaned against the wet stone wall in silence and closed his eyes. He knew that even the most elite search and rescue team of the U.S. military would find it difficult to find him in this unfamiliar area, and he had to rely on himself. "I have to find a way to escape," Tony muttered to himself. Ethan was relieved when he saw Tony nod. He didn't persuade Tony out of kindness, and he also kept a selfish desire for the possibility of escaping together. After all, having help is different from fighting alone. "Very good. First of all, you have to survive," Ethan said. "And to survive, you have to do what they ask. At least for now, we still have a week." Tony opened his eyes, and a trace of determination flashed in his eyes. 1 week, enough. Next, Tony and Ethan began to actively cooperate with the requirements of the terrorists of the 10 Rings gang. "I need welding tools, both acetylene and propane, as well as welding tool tables, helmets, goggles, and 2 sets of precision tools for melting cups." In order to cooperate with the creation, Tony unscrupulously asked these terrorists for raw materials. Although there were many requirements, the terrorists thought it was extremely reasonable. It is normal for a genius inventor to need these materials. What's more, they have cameras watching them all the time, so there will be no accidents at all. Tony and Ethan naturally knew about the real-time surveillance. They chose to stagger the time, showing the production to the surveillance during the surveillance time, and secretly carrying out the escape plan at the same time. First, Tony extracted 0.6 grams of palladium from the 12 missiles, intending to make the life-extending device first. At the same time, New York, USA, SHIELD headquarters. Nick Fury sat in the office. His dark face became even darker after learning about Tony's accident. He had sent a professional search and rescue team to Afghanistan for rescue, but the terrain was too complicated. The search and rescue team worked for 3 days without success, and he was so angry that he almost smashed the vase on the table. There was no way. SHIELD was seriously short of manpower now. Director Pierce took Rumlow and Sidwell away, and then fought with Hydra in the hand. So, all the burdens of SHIELD were transferred to him at once. Moreover, the Bureau is seriously short of manpower now. Natasha was sent to India by him to find Dr. Banner, and Hawkeye was also at the border to kill the remnants who escaped. Only Coulson was left. "Forget it, he has been busier than me, the deputy director, recently. He has used 3 bottles of hair growth agent, and his girlfriend who plays the cello almost broke up with him because of this. It would be inhumane to catch him and pull him. So, he had no choice but to find Jonathan and let him go to Afghanistan to try his luck. Of course, all the public expenses were paid by himself. It was no other reason. When Pierce came back, he found that his son had to pay for his own work, and he would definitely make things difficult for him. After being busy, Jonathan finally had some free time, so he accepted the request of Black Sauce Egg without much consideration. Although the original book did not mention Tony's specific location, he might not be able to find it there, but it was a public travel, and it would be a waste if he didn't go. Moreover, Jonathan had received a message from Dr. Stern before that. Bruce Banner is now living in seclusion in India not far from the Afghan border, and he is ready to come back to find Dr. Stern for experiments. This time, Jonathan can also check out the traces of the green fat man and find an opportunity to get some benefits. After Jonathan arrived in Afghanistan, he quickly began his search plan. Rather than searching, it's better to say that he came here for pure tourism, to see the beauties in Afghanistan, eat some delicious food, and learn about the local customs and practices. As for the local social chaos, with Jonathan's strength, he doesn't need to bring any bodyguards at all. He can single-handedly take down an entire gang and make it to heaven to see God. However, perhaps the local militants are eager to fight for territory and rob arms recently, so for the time being, there are no blind daydreaming goblins who have set their sights on Jonathan, and he is happy to be idle. After all, the expenses are reimbursed by the black salted eggs. How can you be worthy of your stomach and kidneys if you don't have fun here? On the second day in Afghanistan, Jonathan wore a mountaineering suit and leisurely shuttled between the mountains and villages in Afghanistan. According to the memory of the plot in the previous life, Tony was probably trapped in the cracks of these mountains, so Jonathan came here to try his luck. What if he found it? Along the way, Jonathan also learned from the neighboring Superman and tried to absorb the sun's energy to see if there was the same effect. But unfortunately, after these energies were absorbed into his body, they did not strengthen the body in real time and continuously. The body energy absorption would stop after reaching a certain threshold. These usable energies are like a large battery after they are fully stored. When the electricity is used up, it needs to be recharged. In addition, the infinite proliferation and evolution of cells in the body cannot be directly used for proliferation and strengthening due to the low energy utilization conversion rate in the body. It's like, in order to prevent the host from exploiting loopholes, the system has its own ability restrictions. The conceptual abilities brought by each noun card cannot be fully interconnected and produce the effect of 1 + 1 greater than 2. Then it forces you to accumulate draws and draw cards continuously. Dog system. Before in the Black Robe world, Jonathan had luckily drawn the novice card pool across the card drawing authority, but this was one of the loopholes in the system, so all his previously accumulated draws were reset. Now, after traveling back to Marvel from the Black Robe, Jonathan has accumulated about 90 draws, refreshing 3 draws every day, and has accumulated for almost a month. In another month, he can draw 1 more guaranteed draw. This time, he locked the noun card pool to Chloroplast without hesitation. It's a pity not to be a big superhero in Marvel. Putting the ability of big superhero in Marvel is almost far ahead. And with the continuous absorption of energy, Jonathan is getting more and more energetic. Soon, when passing by a small village, Jonathan noticed some suspicious signs. Oi, it feels a bit hot. He found that the appearance of outsiders here is particularly nervous, and they are naturally xenophobic. Moreover, the dress of these residents is not like the local residents of Afghanistan at all. This face, sometimes Indian, sometimes South African, is a mixed hodgepodge. If it is placed in the city, it is indeed fine. But in this mountainous area, it is either an illegal household or hiding some secrets. Thinking of this, Jonathan took out a set of purely local clothes from the system space, put the cloth ornaments on his head and slipped into the village. At the same time, in the cave, Tony and Ethan were, caringly, making missiles for the 10 Rings gang. But secretly, with Ethan's cover and cooperation, Tony has successfully made a miniature arc reactor to replace the car battery connected to his chest. This big thing is too cumbersome, and the internal available electricity can only keep Tony alive for a week. After that, the electromagnet fails, and the shrapnel will be retained in the heart again, and he will die. The energy efficiency maintained by this small blue aperture can allow Tony to live for another 50 years, or break for a big toy for 15 minutes. This big toy is exactly the set of steel armor that Tony wanted to create on a whim. Tony deliberately made the micro-transparent drawings of the armor into multiple copies of parts to confuse the audience. Once these drawings are pasted together, the complete armor drawings can be seen. Using the materials provided by the terrorists, Tony disassembled and assembled them according to the drawings. Whenever someone came to check, they pretended to be making missiles. In fact, with Ethan's cooperation, the progress of the armor was constantly accelerating. However, the cautious leader of the 10 Rings found a clue. According to the picture of the Jericho strategic missile, he carefully compared it in the surveillance and found that it was completely different. So, he led people into the cave with suspicion, but after a search, he did not find any assembled firearms, nor did he find the completed Jericho missile products. Seeing this, the leader was furious and asked his men to catch Ethan and put a red-hot iron ball in front of him, trying to force them to tell him what they were doing. If the doctor didn't tell the truth, they would stuff the iron ball into Ethan's mouth. But Ethan would rather die than tell. Fortunately, Tony hurriedly agreed and promised the leader that he would hand over the complete Jericho strategic missile to the leader tomorrow, which saved Ethan from a disaster. But there was definitely no Jericho missile, so after the leader left, Tony discussed with Ethan to take a gamble and hurry up to complete the final process of the armor before tomorrow morning. At this time, on the other side, Tony's armor was about to be completed. Jonathan demonstrated some force at the village chief's house and successfully locked the hiding place of the 10 Rings gang. They were hidden in the low-lying area of the mountains, and after passing 2 sentry posts, they could see the camp inside. After sending the super-masculine village chief who was about to attack him to Satan, Jonathan came to a hill and observed the territory of the 10 Rings gang with a telescope bought from the black market. There were 4 people stationed at the 2 sentry posts, one on each side, equipped with submachine guns, and there was a big gong next to it, which should be used to send messages when danger occurs. No, this leader is really a coward, not sending electronic information. No wonder the search and rescue team can't find any traces. If the gong is sounded, it will be easy. Jonathan can finish it with 2 lasers. As for the rest, there is a curtain blocking it, so Jonathan can't see the specific content. According to the original plot, it seems that most of the arsenal that Tony sold is piled there. In front of the arsenal is the cave where Tony and others are. After making a rough plan, Jonathan decided to be the 6th one. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he rode a children's bicycle snatched from the children of the half-sugar village and came to the vicinity of the sentry tower. There is no other way. There is only one bicycle that can be ridden in the whole village, so let's just let it be for children. At this time, several sentinels who were so sleepy that they were almost detached were holding their pistols and squinting their eyes at the scene outside the sentry tower. They have been watching for several days. It has always been members of the gang coming in and out, and basically no outsiders. A sentry suddenly saw that a person was riding a children's bicycle not far away and drove towards this side. He quickly woke up his companion and pointed his gun at the direction of the person. "Hey, stop. This is not a place you can enter. If you get closer, I will shoot." The sentry's warning was so loud that it woke up the other 2 in the sentry tower, and there were 2 more guns pointed at Jonathan. "Everyone, do you believe me when I say I am here for tourism? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.